Chapter 1430. Chu Yang rubbed his nose and nodded. There was an inexplicable strange feeling in his heart. Not only did Tan Tan mention himself, he even added the title of Saint King to himself. Minister Chu felt rather gratified. After all, this junior brother of his would not disappoint him. Looking at Gu Yigu's aura that had eased up in an instant, Chu Yang also felt completely at ease. As the king of the 3 Stars Divine Clan, it could be said that Tan Tan hadn't lost the slightest bit of his power, prestige and authority in the clan. As expected of my junior brother, Chu Yang was rather proud of himself. Saint King Chu. Gu Yigu was rather embarrassed. He scratched his squarish head and said, His Majesty had once instructed that Saint King Chu's status is noble and noble. You are the person whom His Majesty values the most in his life. If anyone from the Divine Clan sees you, it will be the same as seeing His Majesty. If Saint King Chu comes, I must receive him well and report his whereabouts to the higher-ups immediately. I didn't expect to still offend Saint King Chu when we meet face to face today. Chu Yang nodded and said with an amicable smile, It's all right. Elder Gu is too polite. Tan Tan had indeed done a lot for him. Chu Yang was rather comforted, feeling rather comforted. However, following that, a strange feeling arose in Chu Yang's heart. He hadn't noticed it earlier, but why did the title of Saint King Chu sound more and more strange now? It was fine that Tan Tan was called Saint King, but why did this title sound so strange to him? Chu Yang thought for a long time before he finally recalled it. In that instant, his face turned as black as the bottom of a pot. Saint King Chu? King of Beasts? Chu Yang had an urge to vomit blood. Saint King Chu? Gu Yigu was rather puzzled. Why did this fellow's expression turn so ugly in an instant? He couldn't help but ask, What's wrong with you? Nothing. Chu Yang suppressed the urge to rush to the 3 Stars Divine Clan right away and chop Tan Tan into pieces. He heaved a heavy sigh of relief. After the two of them exchanged a few words, the hostile atmosphere on both sides eased at once. Other than Gu Yigu, everyone else, including Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang, heaved a long sigh of relief. Everyone felt as if a year had passed during this short confrontation. Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang were sweating profusely as soon as they let out a sigh of relief. He couldn't stop it. There was a feeling of exhaustion in his entire body. The two of them had the strongest battle prowess, but they were also under the greatest pressure. He was still able to maintain his combat state, but his mind had relaxed. However, it was no different from a great battle. Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang looked at each other. Both of them were shocked. After learning that he wasn't an outsider, Gu Yigu's countenance improved considerably. He even became friendly. Holy King Chu, why don't you and your friend come in and have a seat? This old man has something to ask. Of course, Holy King Chu must also have something to instruct. Chu Yang smiled and said, I couldn't ask for more. Gu Yigu let out a hearty laugh and greeted his guest solemnly. Chu Yang, Mo Tianji and the others followed Gu Yigu over. Behind a large boulder was a large courtyard. It was empty inside. Gu Yigu smiled apologetically and went to brew tea. GMO asked in surprise, This? Elder Gu, there aren't many servants here to serve you? Everyone was surprised. For someone like Gu Yigu to be doing business here. Was he actually a commander without an army? Did he even have to personally brew tea? Gu Yigu smiled and said, Of course. Let alone a few, there isn't even one. This old man's identity is sensitive. With one more person, there's an additional risk of my identity being exposed. How would I dare to take the risk? Mo Tianji couldn't help but praise him. Elder's cautiousness is extremely admirable. Mo Tianji was speaking from the bottom of his heart. When one was very weak, no one would say anything if one acted cautiously. They would only feel that it was right. However, when one was at the level of Gu Yigu, one of the few experts in the world, it was rare for someone like him to be so cautious. Because in this world, the number of people who could hurt Gu Yigu could already be counted on one's fingers. However, Gu Yigu was still so cautious. This made Mo Tianji feel that it was rare and commendable. Gu Yigu smiled. The older one is in the martial world, the more cowardly one becomes. Besides, I'm the only one from the divine clan outside. I can be said to be the pivot of all connections. If something were to happen to me, what would happen to the divine clan? He let out a wry laugh. Besides, in your eyes, my cultivation can be said to be pretty high. However, on this continent, there are still people who can easily crush me to death with just a finger. How would this old man dare to be careless? The brothers were dumbfounded. With your peak second-level supreme martial artist cultivation, there's actually someone who can. At once, they felt that this was practically a legend. With a wry laugh, Gu Igu pointed at Chu Yang. He knows that person. At once, several pairs of eyes looked at Chu Yang. Chu Yang let out a dry cough, secretly chuckling. He knew that he was talking about Zi Xiecheng but didn't expose him. He said, "There is indeed such a person." Gu Duxing and the others revealed astonished looks in their eyes. Among the brothers, only Dong Wushang, Mo Lei, and Rui Budong weren't surprised by Mo Qingwu. This was because they had already met Zi Xiecheng a long time ago and also understood Zi Xiecheng's capabilities. They naturally knew that what Gu Igu was saying now was definitely the truth. The tea was already brewed. Gu Igu was evidently also a lazy fellow. Instead of using a teapot, he gave each of them a large teacup that could hold half a liter of water. Inside each cup, half a cup of tea was brewed. "Divine King Chu, I have something to ask of you." Gu Igu picked up his teacup. Cough cough. "Elder Gu, you can call me Chu Yang or Brother Chu. Either is fine. Please don't call me Divine King Chu. I feel awkward." Chu Yang hurriedly declined. "What's awkward about that?" Gu Igu was surprised. This name was the most honorable form of address. Suddenly, haha. GMO spat out a mouthful of tea onto Luo Kadi's face. Then he clutched his stomach and burst into laughter. Evidently, this fellow had already figured out the profoundness behind this name. Caught off guard, Luo Kadi was instantly hit. With the fragrance of tea all over his face, he stood up and wiped his face in a flurry, wishing he could drag GMO out and give him a good beating. All the brothers looked at GMO in bewilderment. They didn't understand why this fellow would suddenly erupt like this. Chu Yang looked at GMO with a gaze that could kill. In a very dangerous tone, he asked, "What are you doing?" "I didn't hear anything." Upon coming into contact with Chu Yang's gaze that could crush a person into pieces, GMO immediately raised his hands in surrender. However, he really couldn't hold back his laughter. Clutching his stomach again, he twitched on the chair. Then, as if something had occurred to him, Mo Tianji suddenly choked on his tea and started coughing repeatedly. Before he could say anything, Chu Yang's murderous gaze turned towards him again. Mo Tianji choked a few times and finally managed to hold it in. Holding back his anger, Chu Yang turned around. Gritting his teeth, he asked amicably, "Elder Gu, what do you want to ask me?" Gu Igu blinked a few times and asked, "Back then that lord? Is he still?" Chu Yang nodded. "Yes, he's still fine now." Gu Igu heaved a long sigh of relief and said repeatedly, "That's good, that's good." Then he asked carefully, "Brother Chu, you and him?" Chu Yang smiled lightly. "Thanks to that lord's kindness, we can talk as peers." "Talk as peers?" Gu Igu's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Chu Yang nodded calmly and reservedly. He casually took out Zi Xiecheng's token and placed it on the table. Activating it with his inner energy, an overwhelming pressure appeared at once. As if sensing that there was still an expert here, this overwhelming pressure actually rushed straight toward Gu Igu. Gu Igu let out a startled cry and leaned backward. With a loud smack, the sturdy ancient pine chair was smashed into pieces by his buttocks. With a thud, his buttocks landed solidly on the ground, creating a huge square pit. He said frantically, "Quick, quick, put it away." It could be said that once bitten, twice shy, this Gu Igu would be afraid of ropes. The lesson back then was etched deeply in his heart. It also made him truly understand that even if he cultivated for another 100,000 years, he would definitely not be that person's match. At the sight of Zi Xiecheng's token now, all his doubts were dispelled at once and he became fearful and fearful. With a smile, Chu Yang kept the token. The reason why he didn't tell the truth and kept it a secret, the reason why he took out the token, was to achieve this effect. If this Gu Igu knew that Zi Sheqing was no longer in this world, no one could guess how he would react. Chu Yang didn't dare to take that risk. After all, if this person really turned against them mercilessly, how many of the 11 of them would be able to survive, was still an unknown. Why don't we do it this way? Everything will be settled with a shock. After this Gu Igu saw this token, even if he had the guts of the heavens, he would definitely not dare to be impudent again. Yes, it's fine now. Chu Yang kept the token and asked rather curiously, how did Elder Gu get acquainted with that big brother of mine? With this question, the expression on Gu Igu's face immediately looked like he was crying and laughing at the same time. After a long while, he finally said desolately, "It's embarrassing to talk about this." He thought to himself whether it was embarrassing or not. In any case, with this relationship, they would find out sooner or later. If he kept it a secret now, he would instead appear petty. With a wry smile, he said, "Back then, I was entrusted by a few elders. Several elders exhausted their life force to help me break through the seal and come to the human world from the 3 Stars Divine Clan's imprisonment. After several thousand years of cultivation, I was already an expert of the current age. I roamed the martial world and was almost invincible in the world. I became more and more conceited and complacent. Finally, one day, I fought with a law enforcement high priest and was inflicted with the heartless soul-destroying palm. This injury could only be treated by the black blood rose. Thus, I immediately went deep into the black blood forest to look for the black blood rose." As he recounted, the past slowly unfolded before Chu Yang. Chu Yang's gaze was rather dazed, as if he could see Zi Sheqing's white robes fluttering in the wind again. He couldn't help but sigh softly in his heart. "Welcome. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 1431. Back then, when I entered the Black Blood Forest, I went on a rampage all the way. As long as someone tried to stop me, I'd send them flying with a slap. Recalling that feeling, apart from being majestic and murderous, now that I think about it, I also feel a little silly and disgusted, like a nouveau riche, Gu Igu sighed. Smart kids remember the world. Super fast hands. Chu Yang and the others muttered inwardly. That was indeed the case. You're indeed a nouveau riche. But I only wanted the black blood rose, and the black blood rose was fearful of blood, so I didn't go on a killing spree. But, unexpectedly, it was because of this that I managed to keep my life. Going 3,700 miles into the black blood forest, the journey was very smooth. I finally saw the black blood rose that I needed. I was about to go forward and pick it when I suddenly heard a voice say to me, "You want this?" Although Gu Igu tried his best to make his voice sound deep and steady, it still sounded like a male duck's voice. This story was told very easily, but it made Chu Yang and the rest of the audience extremely hard to listen to. It wasn't that they couldn't understand, but this voice really made them feel as if they were poisoned. Back then, I was invincible all the way and was very complacent. When I heard the question, I said in a very firm tone, "I want whatever I want." "Why, do you have a problem with that?" And it was this sentence that made me sink into a bottomless abyss. I just finished speaking when I suddenly received a slap for no reason and was sent flying 700 to 800 feet away. I was suddenly attacked from all sides and flew into a rage. I turned around and attacked, but I suffered the greatest pain in my life and suffered the worst defeat of my life. Just a short 15 moves. I only attacked for the first 5 moves. After that, I kept on defending and didn't have any chance to attack. Moreover, I couldn't even defend myself. At that time, I felt like I was being beaten back and forth like a sandbag. At that time, I really couldn't believe that there was actually such an expert in this world. That person who attacked me said as he hit me, "The black blood forest is mine. Do you think I have a problem with that? You came to steal from me and actually asked if I have a problem with that. Let me tell you now, as long as you don't die after being beaten up by me, I have no problem with that." As he spoke, my face was slapped hundreds of times in a row. As Gu Igu spoke, Chu Yang secretly laughed. This was indeed Zi Sheqing style. He didn't know why that big sister was so passionate about slapping people. he listened to Gu Igu's recount. Minister Chu felt that his face was also hurting. He couldn't help but touch his face. With a tragic look on his face, Gu Igu said, "Just as I was about to be beaten to death, I couldn't care less about my pride and roared, 'I haven't killed anyone in the Black Blood Forest.' It was because of this that the slaps stopped." Then the person said, "You didn't kill anyone? Let me ask." Then he sent out some kind of message. A short while later, he suddenly gave me another slap on the face and said, "You can't hurt anyone even if you want to." Gu Igu said to Chu Yang in infinite misery, "This big brother of yours is too domineering." Gu Igu didn't know that Zi Sheqing was a woman, so Chu Yang naturally wouldn't tell him the truth. It was only after hearing his words that they were shocked. Chu Yang couldn't help but be speechless. Domineering? Holy shit. You haven't even seen her when she's really domineering. Then he gave me a slap on the head. I felt my cervical vertebrae suddenly shorten infinitely, my neck thickening infinitely, and then my spine shortening infinitely. My spine shortened infinitely. My legs also shrunk by half. In the end, I felt that even my head had been rubbed twice. When I touched it with my hands, it became square. At this point, everyone, including Chu Yang, all 11 of them felt a chill run down their spines at the same time. Just imagining the scene back then was enough to make them shudder all over. Gu Igu wanted to cry but had no tears. Back then, I thought that I would be able to escape. But after I escaped, the poison still hadn't been removed. Therefore I said, "Elder, I really need a black blood rose." When that person heard that, he said, "All right then, I'll give you a rose." Just as I was feeling happy, a finger tapped on my forehead. "There, it's here." Gu Igu pointed to his own forehead. "This finger has extinguished my star, leaving behind a rose that will never be extinguished." Chu Yang and the others focused their gazes and looked over. At once, they clicked their tongues in wonder. If one were to take a closer look, that dark red dot on the forehead of this great expert Gu Igu was indeed a budding rose. In the end, that person finally showed his benevolence and extorted 3 heavenly treasures from me. Then he gave me a black blood rose. Gu Igu was very sorrowful and indignant. The value of those 3 heavenly treasures was a whole several times that of the black blood rose. If it wasn't for the sake of curing the poison, Chu Yang nodded slowly. He looked at the 3 heavenly treasures in the tribulation dimension. They were still swaying in the wind in his herb field. One was a deep ice lotus, one was a frigid snow lotus, and one was a crimson soul herb. Of course, he wouldn't say anything. He merely nodded and sighed. "I see. Cough, that big brother of mine is indeed a little domineering in the way he does things. But he's still very reasonable." This sentence made Gu Igu's eyes bulge out fiercely. Even the eyes of Gu Duxing and the others also bulged out. Something like this was actually very reasonable. Gu Igu took a breath. With bulging eyes, he said, "Originally, although I wasn't young anymore, I was tall and could also be considered a talent. But now," glancing at his squarish body miserably, he sighed. "Now, even pigs are prettier than me." The corners of Chu Yang's lips spasmed strangely. He almost burst into laughter. The others also kept their mouths tightly shut, trying their best to control themselves. It looked like this Gu Igu still had a lot of self-awareness. Even pigs were prettier than him. In addition, as the price for my release, I also made a promise. Gu Igu laughed rather miserably, yet also as if he was mocking himself. "So long as I see this token, if the holder of this token issues an order to me, I need to do one thing for him without any compensation or conditions." Gu Igu said bitterly, "This matter includes letting me die." Mo Tianji and the others widened their eyes. They looked at Chu Yang. Everyone knew very well what this sentence meant. The token was now in Chu Yang's hands. In other words, as long as Chu Yang said, "Die," Gu Igu would immediately commit suicide. This token in Chu Yang's hands could actually easily decide the life and death of a peak-grade supreme martial artist. What kind of power was this? Gu Igu said bitterly, "And the existence of this promise is my greatest inner demon." Chu Yang heaved a sigh of relief. He smiled from the bottom of his heart. "Elder Gu, I am infinitely impressed by your honesty. Chu Yang was very clear about this. This black blood token was Zi Sheqing's token in the heavens. In this world, less than 10 people knew of this token's existence. But every one of these 10 people was a peak-grade supreme martial artist. This also included Chen Feng and Lu Yun. And now, Chen Feng and Lu Yun weren't on this continent. This meant that there were still 8 people on this continent. Among these 8 people, the blood essence of 3 of them was on this black blood token. Back then, Zi Sheqing had once said that as long as Chu Yang could meet these 3 people with this token, he could ask them to give him the greatest help they could. The people of the black blood forest couldn't come out, but these 3 people were in the outside world. This was the greatest treasure that Zi Sheqing had left for Chu Yang. It was just a pity that these 3 people. It was only today that Chu Yang met one. Gu Yigu looked at Chu Yang, and Chu Yang also looked at Gu Yigu. For a long time, neither of them spoke. But both of them knew that this promise would definitely be fulfilled between the two of them. I'm not willing to order my subjects around like this. This will make me feel very unaccomplished. Chu Yang smiled lightly. He said, but since there's such a promise, I'll fulfill this wish for Elder Gu today. Gu Yigu took a deep breath and said, go on. I just want to ask Elder Gu to help me pass a message to your Saint King. Tell him that I have already reunited with my brothers and will be heading to the northwest to fight Jianghu. Chu Yang smiled slightly and said softly, pass a message for the Saint King. Gu Yigu frowned. He said, you don't have to take care of me. I can do you a big favor, no matter what it is. In his opinion, this request of Chu Yang's was really too light. It was so light that even he himself was embarrassed. Pass a message. Even if Chu Yang didn't say it, he would definitely pass Chu Yang's message back. Because that was the Saint King's instructions. There's no need for that. I'm already very grateful that Elder Gu can pass this message of mine to my junior brother. Chu Yang said with a smile. Frowning, Gu Yigu agreed rather guiltily. All right. He had already made the request. Chu Yang took out the black blood token. A cloud of mist rose from it. Gu Yigu felt relieved at once. Half of the blood essence on it had already been released. As long as he sent the message out, all of it would dissipate. Therefore, Gu Yigu decided to start the transmission right away. He took out a strange mirror and channeled his internal energy into it. At once, the mirror slowly shone brightly. Gu Yigu waved his right hand and a bloody wound appeared on his index finger. He wrote on the mirror with his blood, Gu Yigu reporting to the Saint King. Saint King Chu has already passed by this place. He wants me to tell you that he has already reunited with his brothers and will be heading to the northwest to fight Jianghu. After he finished writing, he had Chu Yang confirm it again. Then he struck the mirror with his palm. After a loud boom, the blood stain disappeared. The message had already been sent out. A cloud of smoke rose from the black blood token again. Gu Yigu heaved a long sigh of relief. The biggest worry in his heart for 20,000 years was finally resolved today. After that, Gu Yigu became even more amiable toward Chu Yang. From his point of view, Chu Yang had done him a huge favor and helped him resolve his inner demons. Moreover, he had done it so effortlessly. That meant that Chu Yang had intentionally helped him. Since someone had given him a favor, Gu Yigu naturally had to return the favor. It was just that even if he beheaded Gu Yigu, he would never have thought that Chu Yang's message this time was definitely no ordinary message. It was a mobilization. If Gu Yigu was only asked to do one thing, the one who would have to work would only be Gu Yigu himself. However, when this message reached Tan Tan's ears, it would mobilize the entire 3 Stars Divine Clan. Monthly votes. Charge. G. To be continued. Chapter 1432. After that, the atmosphere became even more harmonious. Everyone chatted about all sorts of things. Gu Yigu casually recounted some interesting stories and anecdotes of the martial world. Chu Yang and the others listened with great interest. Smart kids remember the world. Super fast hands as they chatted, Chu Yang suddenly thought of something. Elder Gu, there's something I don't understand. Gu Yigu smiled. Go ahead. This isn't the first time I've taken this path. The last time I came, I didn't see you coming out to collect horses, said Chu Yang. Gu Igu was taken aback at once. He asked, the last time? You passed by here? Then did you ride a horse? Chu Yang was stunned. No. Gu Igu said disdainfully, if you didn't ride a horse, why would I come out to collect you? Chu Yang was stunned. Everyone who passes by here, as long as they are horses, must leave them behind. Gu Igu said, 5 clans passed by here in that direction. Now, I've already dealt with the horses of 4 of them. Chu Yang gave him a wry smile. This old fellow was really fierce. Only the Chen clan's wind-chasing beast passed by here the last time. I didn't want it. Gu Igu snorted and said, the blood of that wind-chasing beast stinks. Only a lunatic would want it. Mo Qingwu shuddered. Mo Tianji frowned. Elder, what you mean is, these horses have all been eaten by you? The corners of Gu Igu's lips spasmed a little. No. I've been injured in the past and need blood essence to replenish my body. War horses are full of vigor and have been on expeditions for many years, so there's naturally a vicious aura in them. Besides, it's easier to absorb. After these horses are in my hands, I'll use a secret technique to extract half of their blood essence and consume it myself. Then, I'll sell the horses. The money I get from them is used as living expenses. Then, twice a year, I'll head straight from here to the northeastern wilderness to provide for my clansmen. His eyes were somewhat sorrowful. The place where we live all year round is covered in snow and ice. It's still fine for adults, but for children and the elderly. And for some women, they can't. Chu Yang nodded solemnly and sighed. Over the past 30,000 years, I've already bought a total of 70 million purple crystals worth of resources. The corners of Gu Igu's lips spasmed a little. While burning, killing, robbing, and committing all kinds of crimes, all the money and purple crystals that I obtained were all used to fill this huge hole. Now, I am a peak-grade supreme martial artist. Other than his cultivation and a few taels of silver, he is a pauper. 70 million purple crystals worth of resources. Such a huge number made everyone greatly shocked. One must know that 70 million purple crystals wasn't as simple as 70 million taels of silver. Those daily necessities that Gu Igu had mentioned could all be bought with just gold and silver. A single purple crystal was worth over 10 million taels of silver. In that case, the amount of resources that Gu Igu had sent back was practically inestimable. Why do you need so much? Chu Yang asked in surprise. Some things can be used for many years. The corners of Gu Igu's lips twitched again. Where we come from, most things only have a lifespan of a year. Things like blankets can't be used after 3 months. He continued in a low voice. As for us, back when the world had yet to change, we were still alive. There were 2 billion people. After the change, there were less than 200 million survivors. Moreover, they were all sealed in the wild ice field. 80,000 years ago, it was reduced to 150 million. 50,000 years ago, it was less than 100 million. 30,000 years ago, there were still 70 million people. 20,000 years ago, there were only 40 million left. Now, there are barely 10 million left. Chu Yang and the others couldn't help but look at one another in shock. Such a high rate of population extinction. If this ratio continued, the 3 Stars Divine Clan's extinction was probably not far away. Every time the Tribulation Sword Master is born, the wild ice field will open once. But that time, it would only last for a day before it would close again. It is during these few days that the clan will select experts and rush them out. Then, they will do everything they can to earn money and buy things to send back. When he said this, Mo Tianji raised his hand and said, Elder, there is something that I don't understand. Gu Igu asked, what is it? Since there is only a day's time and only very few people can come out, how do you send in the resources that you have collected? If things can be sent in, won't people be able to come out? Asked Mo Tianji. Gu Igu laughed miserably. We are sealed inside. As long as the gate of life doesn't appear, living people can't come out. However, things sent in from the outside can be received. This means that under normal circumstances, lifeless things can be sent in and out. What that gate of life restricts are only life and soul. Mo Tianji let out an "oh" and fell silent. He secretly wondered what kind of gate of life it was. It was actually so domineering. It could actually restrict souls. And once the identities of those who come out are exposed, they will attract the attacks of the entire continent. Over the years, other than me, no other expert of the 3 Stars Divine Clan has been able to last until the next Tribulation Swordmaster is born. This batch of mine has brought out 400 people, all of whom are elites. However, up till now, I am the only one alive in this world. The others have all died 20,000 years ago. It was only until 3 years ago, when the latest Tribulation Swordmaster was born, that detestable gate of life finally opened. However, my clansmen are all ready. Gu Igu heaved a long sigh. All these years, I have robbed good people and killed bad people. I have indeed killed a lot of people. However, I don't dare to die. I am not afraid of death, but I can't die. Brother Chu, you should also know that those who can cultivate to my level, how many of them are afraid of death? However, I have to beg for mercy in front of that big brother of yours. Not to mention a promise and a few heavenly treasures. Even if he wants me to kneel down and call him grandpa, I will still have to save my life. If I die as well, the Divine Clan will really have no one left in the outside world. Those resources will also never be able to return. At this point, Gu Igu sighed and didn't say anything else. Chu Yang and the others didn't say anything either. What should he say? Everyone didn't know what to say. They just felt that their hearts were heavy. When Gu Igu talked about what happened back then, everyone already found it strange. Wasn't this peak-grade supreme martial artist a little too afraid of death to actually beg for mercy? However, it was only now that they knew and understood. Looking at Gu Igu in front of them, a sense of respect suddenly rose in their hearts. It wasn't difficult to die for Yi Ning generously. What was difficult was to endure humiliation and live for the sake of the clan. After a long while, Chu Yang asked tentatively, Can the 3 Stars Divine Clan and humans coexist peacefully? Gu Igu was furious. His eyes bulged as he said furiously, What do you mean by this? Chu Yang was stunned. Gu Igu said furiously, What do you mean by can the 3 Stars Divine Clan and humans coexist peacefully? Are the 3 Stars Divine Clan not humans? Chu Yang was floored. Was there a need for you to say that? Who in the legends over the past 10,000 years had ever said that the 3 Stars Divine Clan was also humans? The 3 Stars Divine Clan was originally on par with the dragons, phoenixes, fairies, and other races. Since when were they actually humans? Gu Igu's anger hadn't subsided yet. The 3 Stars Divine Clan is just a little special. How are they not humans? When the 3 Stars Divine Clan ruled the world 100,000 years ago, did they ever exterminate the so-called humans? At that time, wasn't it also very normal for the 3 Stars Divine Clan to intermarry with the humans you speak of? Why is it that when these so-called humans rule the continent, even the descendants of interracial marriages are all exterminated? Is it the 3 Stars Divine Clan who is cruel or the so-called humans on the continent who are cruel? The so-called humans on the continent now, other than wearing human skin, in what way can you say that they are really humans? Are they even worthy of being called humans? What nonsense! Lord Gu Igu spat fiercely. Mo Tianji lowered his head and considered for a while. Then, he said, the 3 Stars Divine Clan is indeed the same as humans from birth until they grow up. The only difference is that their meridians are slightly different. Moreover, the bloodline of the 3 Stars Divine Clan can also be awakened. This point seems to be different from ordinary people. Another thing is that they carry the clan symbol on their foreheads from birth. Therefore, they are rejected because of this. But at the end of the day, it's not impossible to say that the 3 Stars Divine Clan are humans. But it's also not impossible to say that they aren't humans. Mo Tianji's words were extremely fair. Chu Yang nodded slowly. He finally understood why the guards of Du Shiqing whom he met when he went to Ironcloud back then had the fire control techniques of the 3 Stars Divine Clan. Presumably, that was some kind of bloodline awakening? The 3 Stars Divine Clan had already suffered for 100,000 years. Then, if he could unify the heavens, wouldn't it be time to give them some fairness? But Chu Yang didn't say this out loud. In fact, he also needed to discuss this plan with his brothers and then seek the opinions of the Moon Breeze couple to come up with a foolproof plan. Otherwise, if he made a rash decision, the day of unification would be the beginning of a great war between the races. No one would be able to bear such a cruel consequence. This was also the real reason why Chu Yang didn't dare to agree to Duke Wei's request back then. Mo Tianji was deep in thought. He glanced at Chu Yang. From Chu Yang's tightly knitted brows, Mo Tianji completely understood what his boss was thinking about. A hint of worry flashed across his eyes. This topic was too heavy. Chu Yang simply skipped over it and suppressed it in his heart. Then, he started to talk about interesting things in the martial world again. Dong Wuxiang and the others also took advantage of this rare break to rest quickly. Mo Qingwu lay in Chu Yang's arms, half asleep and half awake. Elder Gu, back then, as far as I know, there were 3 people who left their mark on this black blood token. Do you know who the other 2 are? Chu Yang asked seriously. I indeed don't know. There was an awkward look on Guigu's face. He said, after all, this isn't something to be proud of. No one would publicize it, Chu Yang said dispassionately. That might not be the case. Elder Gu, do you know that if they weren't one of the few experts in the world, that big brother of mine also wouldn't have allowed them to leave their mark on this? Those who could leave their mark on this are all top-notch experts in the world. Chapter 1433. No matter how thick-skinned one wouldn't treat this as glory either. After being beaten up, having his spirit sealed, and being tortured, he actually went around bragging about it as glory. Gu Igu didn't think that he was that crazy. Smart kids remember the world, super fast at typing. By analogy, the other 2 naturally wouldn't be so stupid either. However, he couldn't refute Chu Yang's words. Because that was indeed the truth. If he wasn't a top-notch expert, that person really wouldn't seal his spirit and enter. Back then, my big brother had once said that in this world, there were only 10 people who were qualified to fight with him. And Elder Gu was one of them. My big brother also only told me about the other 2 people whose names were on this token. May I know who the others are? Chu Yang smiled and said, Elder Gu is very familiar with the heroes of the world. You must know, right? Gu Igu frowned. His squarish head swayed like a hammer as he said, well, I really don't know who has fought with this crazy person before. Chu Yang sweated a little. Then, in Elder Gu's mind, who are the experts in this world? Gu Igu raised his head, his eyes somewhat perplexed, as if he was thinking and rummaging through his memories. Mo Tianji's ears twitched and his gaze became serious. These were all top-notch information that ordinary people couldn't know. Ever since I came out, I've been defeated 8 times. Gu Igu said, and before my cultivation reached peak level, that's not counted. These words immediately shocked Chu Yang and the others. Before his cultivation reached peak level, that was not counted. This meant that after he reached peak level, he had actually been defeated by 8 people. This matter made Chu Yang and the others break out in cold sweat. Were there so many experts in this world? The first time, I snatched a treasure and attracted a person. This person beat me up. But I had already sold that treasure. That beating wasn't light. But in the end, after that person found out about my mission, he didn't kill me. Instead, he gave me 1,000,000 purple crystals. Guigu said. Chu Yang frowned. Who was that person? That person was called Wu Chenfeng. Guigu thought hard. That was 30,000 years ago? Or more than 10,000 years ago? My memories are really unclear. Vianfeng. Supreme martial artist Qin Feng. Chu Yang's body shook. The second loss was to a beautiful woman called Lu Yun. She really likes her horse. At that time, they had agreed to deposit it. She didn't sell it, but the price she offered me was more than 10 times higher than what I offered to sell my horse. But in the end, I still couldn't help myself and took some blood essence to eat. I didn't expect that woman to actually be able to tell after she came back. She gave me a good beating. Gu Igu grimaced. It was only after she beat me up that I found out that she was Wu Chenfeng's wife. Chu Yang was speechless. This Gu Igu was really good at stirring up trouble. Chen Feng and Lu Yun were two legendary figures. One of them beat him up. Mo Tianji suddenly interrupted. That's not right. Ancient, as far as I know, whether it was 20,000 years ago or 30,000 years ago. Seniors Chen Feng and Lu Yun are no longer in this world. Gu Igu said furiously, don't interrupt. How could I not know that they went up and came back? At that time, it was said that they were preparing to save someone. Chu Yang and Mo Tianji immediately understood. So when Wu Jueqing was rescued, it was Chen Feng and Lu Yun who had returned personally. I lost the third battle. It was a law enforcement officer. At that time I was poor. Our clan had already been cut off for a month, so I robbed a law enforcement officer headquarters. Then an old fellow came out of the law enforcement officers. That battle lasted for 5 days and I only lost by one move. Gu Igu shook his head. He sighed. Sigh, I also lost by one move. The 10 of them had crooked mouths and slanted eyes. What the fuck? Robbing a law enforcement officer headquarters. Even someone who was truly courting death didn't do that. Look at this fellow in front of them, he's actually still alive. Is that law enforcement officer still alive now? Chu Yang asked anxiously. Gu Igu snorted, very displeased with Chu Yang for interrupting his recollection. However, on account of Divine King Chu, he still replied reluctantly, at our level of cultivation, it's hard for us to die even if we want to. Chu Yang coughed a couple of times and exchanged a look with Mo Tianji. Mo Tianji's countenance was grim. If that person was still alive, he would probably be their most terrifying enemy. My fourth defeat. And it was by a lousy old fellow among the law enforcement officers. Gu Igu was very furious. I've suffered 3 defeats at the hands of the law enforcement officers. Each time, it was the humiliation of losing by one move. Yet I fucking switched to 3 people. Fuck their grannies. Mo Tianji's face looked as though he was in a deep sleep. His fingers couldn't help but twirl. 3 people. 3 people. Chu Yang felt the same way as well. At this moment, he wished he could curse at the same time as Gu Igu. Fuck their grannies. So many of them. My first defeat was to your big brother. Gu Igu slanted his eyes resentfully at Chu Yang. Actually, this 7th defeat can't be considered a defeat at all. I was basically just getting beaten up from the start to the end. I didn't really fight at all. For the sake of Elder Gu's honesty, Chu Yang very politely spat out a mouthful of tea at him. Gu Igu snorted. His body shook, and a cloud of mist rose. The tea that had been spat on his face earlier evaporated completely. However, after I lost to your big brother, my appearance changed. The law enforcement officers couldn't find me anymore. Gu Igu actually felt rather proud of himself. It was only then that Chu Yang and the others understood. This fellow must have been hunted down by law enforcement experts after robbing the law enforcement headquarters. That was why he had suffered 3 consecutive defeats. Zi Xiecheng had slapped him from tall and thin to short and fat. She had actually helped him achieve his goal, causing the law enforcement officers to be unable to find him. One had to admit, the affairs of the world were truly amazing. As for the 7th defeat, I brought it upon myself, so it can't be considered a defeat. If my primordial spirit hadn't been restrained, that fellow might not have been a match for me. Gu Igu grinned, his white teeth gleaming. I heard that a number 1 expert had popped up, called Tianya or something, so I went to fight him. This was something that happened 7,000 years ago. Back then, I really didn't expect to lose. Actually, I didn't lose either. I was just struck twice by his sword, that's all. Even Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang, who had always been straightforward, couldn't bear to listen to this. Ning Tianya struck you twice with his sword. Then, did you strike him? Gu Igu's face flushed red. He twisted his logic and said, he's much younger than me. He's considered a junior. I let him have his way. Other than Mo Qingwu, who was nestled in Chu Yang's arms, the rest of the 11 people turned their heads away at the same time, spraying tea in unison. Cough cough. Elder Gu is really of noble character and unquestionable integrity. Chu Yang praised against his will. I've always thought that I was thick-skinned. This old fellow's skin is much thicker than mine. Guigu's face and neck were flushed red. My primordial spirit had already been sealed by your big brother back then. If I see Ning Tianya now, I'll definitely beat him up so badly that he has to look for his teeth all over the floor. Why, you don't believe me? We believe you. Chu Yang and the others nodded like chickens pecking at rice. They thought, what's the use of us believing you? Didn't you still lose anyway? In the 8th defeat, I didn't even have a chance to make a move. I was restrained just like that. That person was stronger than your big brother. Much stronger. A look of lingering fear appeared on Guigu's face. And it happened just half a year ago. Half a year ago, Chu Yang thought about it and asked, was that person very handsome and suave, looking just like a scholar? Guigu jumped to his feet at once, a look of astonishment on his face. How did you know? Chu Yang smiled slightly. How could he not know? Because this defeat that Guigu had suffered should have been Xue Leihan's. It should have been right before he met Xue Leihan back then, which was also the time when Chu Yang asked Guigu, the last time I came, you didn't take in your horse? Given Xue Leihan's cultivation, if Guigu could react to it, that would be really strange instead. Cough. Chu Yang coughed. He might as well boast all the way. Of course I know. Because that person is also my big brother. Guigu was stunned. After a long while, he exclaimed, Lei Feng is also your big brother. At last, his eyes widened as he cried out in grief and indignation, I have a feud with your family. Chu Yang burst into laughter. Haven't we turned enemies into friends now? Guigu heaved a long sigh. Chu Yang also heaved a sigh of relief. Ever since Zi Xiecheng left, she had left behind quite a number of mysteries for Chu Yang. But today, one of them was finally solved here. Moreover, Chu Yang was also really sure. At least 3 of the top 10 experts that Zi Xiecheng had mentioned back then were his enemies. Guigu had mentioned 8 of them. Out of that, excluding supreme martial artist Qin Feng and his wife, Ning Tianya, who hadn't fought with Zi Xiecheng and Xue Leihan, there were only 4 left. Out of the 10 people that Zi Xiecheng had mentioned, excluding the Moon Breeze couple, 8 were left. Excluding Guigu, 8 were left. Excluding Qin Feng and Lu Yun, 1 was left. Assuming that all 3 of the law enforcement officers had fought with Zi Xiecheng, then there were still 3 people left out of the 10. Who were those 3 people? No one knew what that was. Chu Yang was rather troubled. He was assuming that all 3 of the law enforcement officers had fought with Zi Xiecheng. What if none of them had fought with Zi Xiecheng? This wasn't impossible. Wouldn't that mean that there was still one person whose whereabouts couldn't be found? And this person was a huge sore point for Chu Yang. What if all of them were law enforcement officers? Chu Yang thought about it so much that he felt dizzy. Beside him, Mo Tianji was deep in thought with his head lowered. Ao Shiyun's brows were tightly furrowed. Mo Lair's eyes were filled with worry. Xie Danqiong's expression was solemn. Gu Duxing's brows were tightly knitted together. They had all heard something unusual from this conversation. Dong Wushang's expression was calm and unperturbed. GMO grinned, not taking it to heart. Luo Kadi looked at the sky from the corner of his eyes, not considering at all. Rui Budong's legs swung back and forth, even more relaxed. These few people definitely wouldn't use their brains. To Dong Wushang, they weren't afraid. A sovereign in front of him also used a saber strike. A second-grade supreme martial artist also used a saber strike. Even if Xue Leihan was right in front of him, as long as he was an enemy, he would use a saber strike. As for winning or losing, Second Master Dong had never considered it. Second Master Ji and Luo Kadi, on the other hand, thought, this isn't within the scope of our worries. Whatever they say, we'll do it. As for Rui Budong, it was even simpler. At most, we'll just fight with our lives on the line. The few of them had a completely different mentality, begging for votes. There were still more than 50 votes to go to Guan Guan's chrysanthemum. Let's stab it and that fellow can have a good time. Come, let's give her a good time. GRQ. Chapter 1434. Especially Dong Wushang and the other 3, They were even more carefree and lazy. It was no wonder that Emotionji often said, "If I worry about these guys every day, sooner or later, I will become old before I get old. Enemies can't torture me, but these bastards can tire me to death." After resting for a while, everyone said their goodbyes. Gu Igu didn't urge him to stay and sent him out of the door. "Have a safe journey." Gu Igu waved at the 11 people who had left into the distance. "Don't worry, we will meet soon." Chu Yang waved his hand, and the 11 people disappeared from the top of the snowy mountain in the blink of an eye. Scratching his head, Gu Igu muttered to himself, "I'm not going to the place that all of you are going to. How are we going to meet so quickly?" In a snowy land, the camps of the 8 great clans stood in silence. Diwu Ro stood at the entrance of the tent and looked at the fluttering snowflakes in the sky. No one knew what he was thinking. Xiao Jingyan and Shi Qishu had been gone for 2 days and had yet to return. Diwu Ro wasn't worried about the 2 of them, but he was looking forward to one person, Chu Yang. If Chu Yang didn't come, the pressure from the other side would be too small. There would be no resistance at all. So much time has passed. This is such a good opportunity to stir up chaos in the world. You, the master of Tribulation Sword, should have seized it. But why is there still no movement? Diwu Ro thought. Then, his thoughts turned back to the mysterious man. Who is it using this matter to their advantage? Why does it seem like he's really helping me? Diwu Ro stood motionless for a long time. What he didn't know was that just a moment ago, a few hundred zhang to the right of the camp, a dozen or so figures drifted over like a breeze, drifting into the northwest. The Tribulation Sword Master that Diwu Ro had been looking forward to was already here. Under Chu Yang's leadership and Emo Tianji's planning, he was like a sharp arrow that pierced into the depths of the northwest snowy plains. Of course, they had noticed the camps of the 8 great clans. However, now was not the time for them to show their might. Moreover, the other party's strength was very strong here. So, Emo Tianji did not intend to meet them head-on. Emo Tianji's real plan was to not expose his identity. Make use of the Li clan's power as much as possible to fight a war of attrition with the 8 super clans. The more energy consumed, the better. Now things had come to this. Even Chu Yang couldn't guess what Emo Tianji was thinking. The snowflakes in the sky were thick and dense. Chu Yang realized that the places that he had cleared and the mountain ranges that he had overturned the last time he came here were already covered in silver. There was a place that was still fresh in Chu Yang's memory. He tried to turn over the layer of snow, and found that the layer of snow had increased by 70 to 80 feet. It could be seen that during this period of time, the heavens had not been idle. It had been snowing with all its might. The 11 of them were all dressed in white under Chu Yang's insistence. Emo Qingwu's red clothes had also become snow-white. The small wind fox was still sleeping in Emo Qingwu's pocket, but a small tail had grown out from its butt. Chu Yang was amazed. This little guy has eaten a lot of good things. Was he planning to sleep all the way to the peak? After resting 3 times, they had reached the depth of 2,000 miles. Although they were already far enough away from the Li clan's headquarters, Emo Tianji was still cautious. He ordered everyone to fly close to the ground. They must not leave any traces behind. While they were rushing forward, they suddenly heard a faint sound coming from the front. In this world of ice and snow, there were actually people fighting? Chu Yang, who was at the front, waved his hand. The 11 of them lay down neatly on the snow. The sound became more and more urgent, and it was moving towards them. It was the sound of weapons clashing. There were also people cursing furiously. They could faintly hear someone saying, "Who are you people? Li clan?" Then, there was a sinister laughter. The sound of the wind suddenly became louder. But everyone knew that this was not because the wind had become louder, but because the people fighting were getting closer and closer. The sound of the wind caused by their fighting was mixed with the power of heaven and earth, causing the wind force to increase by several times. Emo Tianji frowned. He thought for a while and exchanged a look with Chu Yang. Chu Yang nodded slowly. The 2 of them understood that since there were people fighting here, it must be people from the 8 super clans and the Li clan. At most, there would be law enforcement officers. No matter which side it was, to them, they were all enemies, but also opportunities. Chu Yang turned his head. Mo Tianji stretched out his hands and pointed to both sides. Chu Yang, Gu Duxing, Mo Qingwu, GMO and Luo Kadi silently went to the left side. Then the snow rolled and buried the 5 of them under the snow. Mo Tianji, Dong Wushang, Ao Xian, Xie Danqiong, Rui Badong and Mo Lei stayed at the right side. A path of 400 to 500 feet was cleared. With a whoosh, a white figure rushed over as fast as lightning. Beside him, there was another white figure, but he was already drenched in blood. Behind them, left and right, there were 2 figures flying in the air. One of them laughed sinisterly as he flew down. Xiao Jingyan, since you've come to us, do you still want to leave? Stay and have some fun. The thin and long figure in front was Xiao Jingyan of the Xiao clan. Upon hearing that, he said angrily, "You are indeed from the Li clan." The white figure let out a long laugh and said sternly, "Of course." He attacked from the air. Xiao Jingyan dodged and Shi Qishu rushed over from the side. The 2 of them whistled and rushed back with all their might instead of fighting. The big hand in midair made a crack in the air with a whoosh. It seemed to make a sound like glass breaking. The crack extended in all directions and a black hole appeared. But Xiao Jingyan and Shi Qishu had already rushed out. 2 8th-grade supreme martial artists joined forces. Although the other party was 4 8th-grade supreme martial artists and they couldn't beat them, escaping was not a problem. But how could Chu Yang let them escape? If they left, where would he go to watch the show? With a thought, the sword spirit rushed out of the tribulation space with a whoosh, invisibly blocking the path of the 2 men. The 2 of them had just rushed out 200 feet when a murderous aura suddenly rose in front of them. The 2 of them were shocked. Before they could dodge, the murderous aura had already hit them in the face. It was as if there was a pair of hands in the dark. The left hand pressed on Xiao Jingyan's forehead and the right hand on Shi Qishu's shoulder. The 2 of them screamed and staggered. At the same time they shouted, "Ghost!" For a moment, they were scared out of their wits. The sword spirit attacked with an illusory body. Although the enemy couldn't hurt him, he couldn't hurt them either. But it was enough to obstruct them. With this obstruction, the 4 white-robed men behind them had already flown out. They stood in front of Xiao Jingyan and Shi Qishu and sneered. "Xiao Jingyan, Shi Qishu, you can't leave." Shi Qishu's eyes were still filled with fear as he stared ahead. His lips trembled and turned pale. There's a ghost? What ghost?" The leading white-robed masked man waved his hand. "Kill them." The 4 of them attacked together. Xiao Jingyan and Shi Qishu were uneasy and at once fell into a disadvantageous position. Just now, the 2 of them clearly felt a cold hand touching their foreheads and could clearly feel the power on it. Now that they opened their eyes and saw nothing, they panicked at once. And in the midst of a fierce battle, they couldn't concentrate. Instantly, they fell into a state of being beaten up. But the 4 white-robed men were also anxious and cursed wildly. They didn't really want to kill Xiao Jingyan and Shi Qishu in the first place. They just kept exerting pressure on them. But now, these 2 bastards actually didn't run away. And they were in a daze. Weren't they fucking courting death? It doesn't matter if you want to die, but don't ruin our plan. On the other side, Chu Yang and Mo Tianji were communicating telepathically. Plan. This was Chu Yang. "Should we leave these 2 here?" Mo Tianji said, "These 2, one is called Xiao Jingyan and the other is called Shi Qishu. Both are important figures in big clans. If we leave them here, it will be helpful for our future plans." Chu Yang pondered. "But I don't understand. But one thing is for sure. These 4 are definitely not from the Li clan. I've basically seen everyone from the Li clan, especially the experts." Mo Tianji was silent for a while, as if shocked by Chu Yang's words. Then he said, "Not from the Li clan? But they're pretending to be from the Li clan?" "Yes." Chu Yang frowned. Mo Tianji said, "Then, what's their purpose? Or rather, what are their plans? Could it be on Diwu Qingrou's side?" Chu Yang was puzzled. "That's the problem. Diwu Qingrou doesn't have such experts." Mo Tianji frowned at once. As soon as he heard about this situation, he immediately felt that something was wrong. Mo Tianji thought for a while and said slowly, Diwu Qingrou's strength, whether he has such experts, can you be sure? Chu Yang was startled. I can't be sure. Mo Tianji's eyes flashed. He said slowly, although I can't be sure, I know that Diwu Qingrou's shadow is definitely here. So I've decided that this chance encounter will be my first battle with Diwu Qingrou. The first battle. Chu Yang's heart skipped a beat. So soon, so early it's coming? Chu Yang looked at the battle circle and said, Tianji, can you tell? These 4 people didn't use any killing moves at all. Although their murderous intent is very strong, but I have a feeling that they don't want these 2 people's lives. Mo Tianji said, yes. So, the possibility of Diwu Qingrou using this matter as a pretext is the highest. No matter what Chu Yang said, Mo Tianji was now set on Diwu Qingrou. Exerting pressure? Chu Yang muttered to himself. Mo Tianji's voice suddenly became urgent. No matter what, we have to mess up this matter once. These 4 people don't want these 2 people to die, this is for sure, but we can't let them do as they wish. Chu Yang said, what do you mean? Let's interfere and keep these 2 people here? Mo Tianji's eyes flashed and he said decisively, 1 dead. 1 dead. That's the best situation. Chu Yang's eyes lit up. Great plan. The battle here was close to reaching its climax. Xiao Jingyan and Shi Qishu quickly adjusted their moods. Although they were still suspicious, they didn't dare to be distracted anymore. But the disadvantage was already set. The 2 of them used all their skills but couldn't turn the situation around. At this moment, Mo Tianji transmitted a message to them, move, you're almost exhausted. Chapter 1435. On the battlefield, the situation of both sides had changed subtly. Smart kids remember Network's super fast hands. The 4 men in white roared and shouted, as if they were attacking with all their might. However, there was a limit to their attacks. At the very least, Xiao Jingyan and Shi Qishu were always able to block the attacks just right. They didn't injure themselves or lose their lives. This sense of propriety was extremely well grasped. If not for the fact that there were observant bystanders, even Xiao Jingyan and Shi Qishu would only think that they had shown their prowess and blocked the attacks of the other party. Such a situation shouldn't have happened among experts of the same level. However, the other party had 4 people who were twice as strong. It wasn't difficult at all for them to do this. Xiao Jingyan, Shi Qishu. The leader of the masked men in white laughed sinisterly. Do you really think that the Li clan is so easy to bully? You actually dare to come thousands of miles deep to spy on us with just 2 people. You've gone too far. Xiao Jingyan was panting. As he drew his sword, he sneered. The Li clan is nothing more than this. The masked men in white roared angrily, kill him. The attacks of the 4 people instantly became much fiercer. However, Xiao Jingyan's eyes suddenly lit up. The other party suddenly increased their attacks, but the rhythm was a little too fast, causing the coordination between the 4 people to be a little strained. This strained coordination was fleeting, but it was a good opportunity to break out of the encirclement. With a roar, he lifted his foot and stomped on the ground. With a loud bang, a deep trench suddenly appeared on the ground with a cracking sound. The trench split into 2 sides endlessly, like a spiritual snake that had a life of its own. As the trench split apart, it actually emitted a crackling sound. All the snow, stones, and soil on the ground were blown up explosively. They shot outwards. Xiao Jingyan and Shi Qishu rushed outwards with the sand, stones, and soil under the power of this explosion. Both of their swords shone brightly. The sword light flashed and rushed out 7 to 8 feet, looking like they were going all out. The 4 people on the other side obviously didn't expect the 2 of them to suddenly go all out. The 2 people who bore the brunt of the attack couldn't help but split to the sides. The sky darkened, go! Xiao Jingyan yelled, and the 2 of them rushed out of the gap like mad tigers. The moment they broke out of the encirclement, the 2 of them simultaneously bit the tip of their tongues and spat out a mouthful of blood. Using a secret technique that could damage one's body, they abruptly increased their speed. Like 2 massive dragons, They charged out amidst a blizzard, like an arrow leaving the bow. Dashing forward, the 4 white-robed men heaved a sigh of relief. These 2 bastards finally knew how to escape. Otherwise, it would really be difficult to continue the show. However, he shouted, "Where do you think you're going? Leave your life here. Whatever it takes. Kill these 2 bastards. Chase." The 4 of them chased after him at the same time, but they had to slow down a little. They couldn't really catch up. The 2 people in front didn't even turn their heads. Although they heard the shouts behind them, they ignored them. He stomped his feet on the ground. The entire piece of land suddenly split apart and rose up from the ground. She threw herself at him. The 4 snorted coldly and drew their swords. With a flash of their swords, they broke through the wall. Then, they heard a miserable howl in front of them. Shi, who was running, fell forward like a kite with a broken string. Xiao Jingyan was shocked and grabbed his shoulder. "Sure. What's wrong?" Shi's eyes were round and his teeth were clenched. "So ruthless." Xiao Jingyan looked over and couldn't help but roar furiously, "Li Clan! You're so vicious!" A sword pierced through Shi's chest from the back and came out from the front. The tip of the sword was dripping with blood and was actually melting. This was a sword made of ice. Shi said in a trembling voice, "I can't do it anymore. I'll block the pursuers for you. Hurry up and leave." Xiao Jingyan roared and spat out another mouthful of blood. He grabbed Shi and threw him onto his back. With a long and miserable howl, he shot out like an arrow leaving the bow. His speed was actually a little faster than before. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the blizzard. That miserable howl filled with anger was still echoing in the air, but he had already disappeared. The 4 people behind him were stunned. What was going on? Why did Shi suddenly suffer a fatal injury? When they broke through the entire snow wall, snow and fog filled the air. They couldn't see anything at all. By the time they could see clearly, Shi had already stabbed his sword. That sword, the 4 of them saw clearly from the back. It pierced through his chest and went straight into his heart. Then, it pierced through his chest and stayed in his body. Shi, even if he could rely on the cultivation of an 8th-grade supreme martial artist to struggle at death's door for a while, he would definitely die in the end. Who did it? The 4 of them asked together, exasperated as they looked at each other. "We're here to exert pressure, not to really kill." These people were the strength of their own alliance now. Killing one would mean losing a part of their strength, let alone an 8th-grade supreme martial artist. After seeing the confusion on each other's faces, everyone was even more confused. No one knew that at the moment when the snow wall was just raised, at the moment when the 4 of them used their swords to break through the snow wall, the sword spirit received Chu Yang's instructions to condense ice into a sword, float behind Shi, and throw the sword out. Silently, the mission was completed just like that. The sword pierced through his chest. When it just pierced through his body, Shi immediately realized it. He used his internal energy to seal it, but how strong was the sword spirit? Even though he only used half of his strength, the ice sword still pierced through Shi's body just like that. Along with his body temperature, it slowly melted. Mo Tianji's order to move. Chu Yang didn't really move. Instead, he let the sword spirit move. This was more secretive. Sure enough, one killed and one escaped. Such an expert, such a status, killing one would be an irreconcilable feud, leaving one alive would bring the hatred back. So that this feud wouldn't be unjust and couldn't be cleared without a witness. When the time was right, it would be exposed. The one left alive would be a strong help at that time. Whether it would be internal strife or just feeling aggrieved, there would always be something that could be used. This was the true intention of Mo Tianji's operation this time. A part of it, the 4 8th-grade supreme martial artists looked at each other for a while. The leader finally reacted. He turned around abruptly and shouted coldly, "So there are still friends here? Which group are you from? Come out and meet us." The 4 of them understood. Except for them. There must be someone hiding in the dark who made the move. And with one move, the matter had worsened to the point of no return. Not only did they overreach and lose an 8th-grade supreme martial artist, but they also left behind a hidden danger. In the future, it would be better if they weren't recognized by others. If they were recognized by Xiao Jingyan, the Shi clan and the Xiao clan would probably break off relations with the law enforcement officers immediately. I raised the tree, nurtured it, waited for it to bloom and bear fruit. Then, I brought a chair and fixed a ladder, ready to pluck the fruit. However, at this moment, someone had picked the fruit from the ladder he had moved over just as he was about to reach out to pick the fruit. The 4 of them were feeling this way now. How could they tolerate this? There was a shout. The snowflakes fluttering in the air were all shattered into pieces. The ground also shook a little. But the surroundings were silent. The snowfield was vast and no one came out. The 4 of them separated with a swoosh, standing in 4 directions. Then, with tacit understanding, they stomped their right feet at the same time. Come out! There seemed to be blue electric sparks in the air, suddenly intertwining and flashing. With a boom, all the snow within a radius of several thousand feet flew up close to the ground, hundreds of feet high in the air. The 2 of them lowered their heads at the same time. Their eyes flashed across the ground around them, and the other 2 looked up at the same time. They focused their eyes on the empty snow to see if there was anyone hiding. At this moment, a hoarse laugh with endless vicissitudes of life sounded. A black shadow suddenly flashed out from the white snow. Without landing, it went 1,000 feet northwest like a wisp of smoke. Only you can frame the Li clan, but I can't take advantage of the situation? By the time he finished speaking, he was already 2,000 feet away. The 4 of them struck out at the same time. 4 hurricanes merged into one, winding and spiraling into a thick tornado, chasing after him rapidly. Then, it transformed into a huge golden palm with a radius of 1,000 feet and slammed down fiercely. It slammed the escaping shadow into the ground in an instant. Before the 4 of them could breathe a sigh of relief, they saw that the black shadow actually jumped up again without a scratch. He laughed mockingly and said, "What great martial arts, how majestic, how murderous. I've learned a lot." With a whoosh, he flew out like a clear black line in the wind and snow. A strong enemy, an expert. Chase. The 4 of them felt a chill in their hearts. With a leap, they chased after him like clouds. This person must not be allowed to escape. If he were to leak out today's matter, it would be a huge problem. The 4 figures disappeared in front of them. The empty snow fell to the ground with a plop, splashing up like an avalanche and spreading outwards like waves. 11 figures of the same color as the white snow leaped up from the accumulated snow. It was Chu Yang and the others. Gu Duxing looked at them strangely and counted. He wondered, they're still here? Who was it that led them away just now? It's a little trick of mine. Chu Yang said hurriedly, let's chase after them. Today, we must find out the origins of these 4 people. We must find out who is the person behind all this. The 11 of them flew out at the same time, sticking close to the ground. Dense snowflakes fell from the sky. In a short time, the messy battlefield was restored to a silver and white state. There were no traces at all. Luo Kadi and GMO were puzzled as they flew. They opened their mouths and finally couldn't hold it in anymore. They asked telepathically, since we want to find out their origins, we could have just come out directly to capture and interrogate them. Why did we have to lead them away first and then chase after them? Chu Yang and Imo Tianji rolled their eyes and pretended not to hear. They really had nothing to say to these 2 blockheads. These 2 were definitely not stupid. It was just that as long as Chu Yang, Imo Tianji and the others were by their side, they would definitely not use their brains to think. The 2 of you just happened to add up to a, character. Ao Shiyun sneered and said, one is too horizontally, the other is too vertically. Welcome. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 1436. GMO flew into a rage. You're smart? Then you can say 4 or 5. If you can't, be careful that second Master G will cut off your penis. Ao Shiyun snorted and said, when we came out earlier, it was a direct confrontation. We were in the open and didn't have much of an advantage. But now, they don't know about our existence. We are in the dark and behind their backs. This can reduce casualties. Do you understand? Smart kids remember the net and are super fast at typing. Especially for the sake of you two idiots. What if you two are so stupid and get cut off by others? Do you understand? And this way, their backs are facing us and we are in the dark. There is something in front that attracts them and makes them uneasy. Our chances of winning are almost 5 times higher than in a direct confrontation. And you still want to fight them head-on. Ao Shiyun shook his head repeatedly. I'm really puzzled. Is there tofu residue in your head? GMO and Luo Kudi's faces instantly became like a monkey's, but they wanted to refute. Firstly, this wasn't the time to throw a tantrum. Secondly, they really couldn't refute. Indeed, the two of them didn't think of this point. Now that they were scolded, they deserved it. Ao Shiyun also didn't know what method Chu Yang used to lure the enemies away. At this moment, he was also confused. If GMO and Luo Kudi fought back here, Ao Shiyun could only avoid the battle. However, GMO and Luo Kudi had ignored this important question that could allow them to turn defeat into victory. They looked at each other resentfully and GMO scolded hatefully, "It's all your fault, you idiot. You made me despise you." Luo Kudi said angrily, "You're smart? Why didn't you think of it?" The two of them looked at each other fiercely and snorted heavily. One turned his head to the west and the other turned his head to the east. They stopped talking. Chu Yang, Gu Duxing, Mo Tianji and the rest of the 8 almost burst out laughing. What Ao Shiyun said today was really classic. The two of you form a well. One is too horizontally and the other is too vertically. I'm really puzzled. Is there tofu residue in your head? Regarding this question, it's not appropriate to answer. But no one knew that GMO had already answered in his heart. He gritted his teeth. My head isn't tofu residue. It's not tofu residue either. It's pretending to be a puppy. Up ahead. The 4 masked men in white chased after the black shadow in front of them. In the blink of an eye, they had traversed dozens of miles. The black shadow kept its head down as it sprinted. It was always leading by less than 1,000 feet. He couldn't pull her away, nor could he get close to her. The snowflakes in the sky were thick and dense. If it weren't for the fact that the 4 of them had a high cultivation base, they would have lost him long ago. This made the 4 of them very anxious. This distance was really too fucking awkward. At such a distance, if the person in front of them was just a little bit weaker, like a 7th grade supreme martial artist or a middle grade supreme martial artist, the 4 of them would be able to kill him with a single palm strike. However, the person in front of them was obviously not weaker than them. At such a distance, he couldn't do it. Moreover, after a palm strike, if he didn't kill him, he would be used by the other party as a propulsion force to speed up his escape. "Boss, what should we do?" one of the white-robed men asked, his eyes flashing with bloodthirsty eagerness. The white-robed man in the lead chased madly, while looking at the surrounding terrain. There was a mountain pass in front of them. The 4 of them had just passed through here. There were 2 mountains side by side, and there was another mountain behind them. It was a winding path. This was also the path that Chu Yang and the others had taken to escape. The mountain was hard. It couldn't be shaken. The eyes of the white-robed man in the lead suddenly lit up. He said hurriedly, "There's a big bend in front. If he wants to leave, he has to go around it. If he goes around it, it'll be our chance. We'll immediately split into 2. 3rd and 4th, the 2 of you will immediately go around from the left and go around to the front. 2nd, and I will immediately activate the secret technique and use our life force to speed up. We'll catch up with him and hold him back. Once you guys arrive, you can keep him here." Okay. This plan was really the most reasonable one at the moment. After chasing for so long, the 4 of them already knew that the strength of both parties was about the same. The other party was also an 8th grade supreme martial artist. As long as they could use their life force to activate the secret technique, they would definitely be able to catch up with him. Catching up with him and holding him back with the strength of 2 people was absolutely foolproof. And in this period of time, the 2 people who went around just happened to arrive as the fresh troops. By this time, both parties were almost exhausted. Even if the other party still had combat power, it would definitely not be more than half. The two people who had used up their life force could take a rest at this moment, and the fresh troops would press on with all their might. They could capture or kill the enemy in one fell swoop. It was not advisable for the four of them to burn their life force together, because then all four of them would be exhausted at the same time. If they encountered a strong enemy, it would be a complete wipeout. The discussion was settled. The white-robed man in the lead roared, "Stop!" How could the black shadows in front be willing to stop? They continued to fly and were already close to the mountain pass. The two white-robed men suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. Then, the two white shadows suddenly shot forward like a rocket. With a whoosh sound, they chased after the white-robed men at twice the speed they had just used. The other two figures shot out like lightning, flying close to the ground. Along the left side, like two wisps of smoke, they were about to fly up to the peak. The four of them separated. At the back, Ruibadong, who had always been on the side, growled, "Ruibadong." Ruibadong let out a muffled roar. His whole body suddenly emitted hot air. In an instant, it was as if a fire phoenix had appeared in front of everyone. His 2 feet stomped on the ground, and his body flew 500 feet into the air. His 2 arms spread out like a big bird, and with a whoosh, he flew out in the air. His speed was so fast that the sound of the wind caused by his movement actually caused the oncoming wind to pause for a moment. It was the secret technique of the Phoenix clan, Phoenix dances in the clear sky. Once it was used, it could allow people with the Phoenix bloodline to fly in the air like a real phoenix. As long as one breath of energy was not used up, they could continue to fly. Rui Butong's figure flashed in the white snow overhead and disappeared like a shooting star. Then he flashed again 2,000 feet in front of them and disappeared completely. Mo Tianji said hurriedly. The 10 of them flashed and flew toward the left side of Rui Butong. These people were related to the doubts in Chu Yang and Mo Tianji's hearts, as well as their future plans. No matter what, they had to be clear. Now that they had split up, it was a heaven-sent opportunity. The distance was getting closer and closer. The murderous look in the eyes of the 2 masked men in white became more and more serious. At this time, they didn't say a word. With the strength of this person in front of them, he must be an important person in the Li clan. If they killed this person, the Li clan's strength would be greatly reduced. They were already close to 500 feet, 300 feet, 200 feet. The 2 of them were already prepared to pounce over in one go. The light dimmed, and the sound of the wind suddenly became urgent. The 3 of them rushed into the mountain pass almost at the same time. And on the other side, the 2 people who took a roundabout route had already reached the mountainside. Success was right in front of them. At this time, the black shadow running in front suddenly turned back, and suddenly spun on the spot like a whirlwind. With a whoosh, he flew back close to the ground. His body spun in a spiral, just like an oversized drill. The distance between the 3 of them had reached a point where they could attack. The 2 men in white had already gathered their strength and were ready to attack. Even if it were the 2 of them, they had no confidence that they would be able to turn around and retreat in such a short period of time. Not only did they have to endure the immense pain of their meridians going against the flow, but they also had to have the timing. And it was even more important to grasp the timing. If they didn't grasp the timing well, they would be walking right into the enemy's trap. But this person did everything as if it was a part of nature. He did it effortlessly, charging forward violently. Carelessly retreating, his speed actually didn't decrease at all. The 2 of them were still charging forward. With a roar, the 2 of them stabbed out with their swords at the same time, and their left palms, which had already accumulated to the peak, also slapped out fiercely. The 2 of them came into contact in an instant. That black shadow rushed forward close to the ground, causing the 2 swords to lose their target at the same time. 2 palms also whizzed out, but only the residual force hit the back of the man in black. Burning life force could not only increase speed, but also cultivation and strength. Although it was just residual force, This kind of strength after two 8th grade supreme martial artists leveled up was not something that an 8th grade supreme martial artist's body could withstand. The two of them relaxed. They thought that they would at least be seriously injured by the fake. But just as this thought arose in their minds, they saw that the man in black rushed through the gap between the two of them like a loach, and actually started to run back. The speed of the three of them was extremely fast. After one contact, they passed by each other. The two of them couldn't hold back their momentum and rushed out more than 100 feet, and that black shadow had already rushed out more than 100 feet in the opposite direction. The attack of two 8th grade supreme martial artists didn't even make him cough up a mouthful of blood. This kind of thing made the two men in white almost vomit blood themselves. They hurriedly turned around and continued to pursue. They were really so angry that their bellies were about to explode. The black shadow in front of them turned a corner and fled to the right, sticking close to the mountain wall. The two of them gave chase without even thinking. In the sky, I'll chase you to the Lingxiao Hall. In the ground, I'll chase you to the King of Hell Palace. With a few whooshes, the three of them had already disappeared into the wind and snow, one fleeing and two chasing. This is bad. This direction is wrong. It's going in the opposite direction from 3rd and 4th. The leader of the masked men in white secretly cursed. The original plan was completely destroyed by the other party's turn and escape. Let's catch up with him first. With a long whistle, 3rd and 4th will find the direction and rush over. There's no need to worry about them. The second man in white said. That's true. Then let's speed up. The black shadow in front seemed to be tireless, running in a straight line with its head down. In an instant, it had covered dozens of miles of mountain road and disappeared at the foot of the mountain. The four men in white split into two, left and right, and the distance between them was getting farther and farther. The two men in white, 3rd and 4th, who were climbing, flew up to the mountainside with a few whooshes. They took a breath, and with a few more whooshes, they reached the top of the mountain. This was a snowy cliff, very steep. They only needed to flip over this mountain and complete the roundabout plan. The two of them took a breath, raised their heads at the same time, looked at the distance, and prepared to leap up. At this moment, a head suddenly popped out from above their heads, two shifty eyes looking down. Chapter 1437. Of course, if it was really an expert in interrogation, there was another most suitable candidate here. And it was a top expert. It was Immortal. This was the black demon from his previous life. But Immortal's current identity was his brother's wife. How could Chu Yang order her to do this? 4 snow walls were built to form a separate interrogation room. Ao Shiyun and Xie Danqiong carried the two people in. Instantly, screams came from inside. At first, it was cold snorts and contemptuous spitting sounds. Then, it was unknown what was going on. All in all, the sound was extremely terrifying. Even Imo Tianji had goosebumps on his face. Then, the earth-shattering screams would make anyone who heard it cry. Imo Tianji immediately asked Imo Qingwu to go far away to one side. He even tore a piece of cloth from his robe and plugged Imo Qingwu's ears. Chu Yang and the others naturally wouldn't be there. They all walked to Imo Qingwu's side, far away from the snow house. After a long time, Luo Kadi had already returned with Rui Budong on his back. Xie Danqiong still hadn't come out. Ao Shiyun came out 7 or 8 times. The first time he came out, he almost threw up his intestines. He vomited crazily until he was sure there was nothing in his stomach before he went back in. But after a while, he came out to vomit again. Even someone like Ao Shiyun could vomit. It was clear how much the two people inside were tortured. Tough guys. Imo Tianji looked at the still snow house and sighed deeply. I don't want to humiliate such tough guys. But, if we don't do this, we won't be able to get the information we want. This is something that can't be helped. Chu Yang took a breath. It was as if the snow still carried the smell of blood. He said softly, "Are also doing this for survival. In this world, there are too many good guys. It's a pity that there are too many good guys who are our enemies." Everyone fell silent. Especially Gu Duxing and Dong Wushang. They frowned and were deep in thought. The two of them weren't stupid. They naturally knew that Chu Yang and Emo Tianji's words were actually meant for the two of them. After a long time, the screams inside became softer. But after a while, suddenly she started to shout angrily. Emo Tianji had a complicated look on his face. He said, "Xie Danqiong is really ruthless." He gave these two people incomplete versions of the heavy pills. Even Chu Yang shuddered when he heard these words. A full 4 hours passed. Ao Shiyun came out to vomit a few more times. Xie Danqiong finally came out. As soon as he came out, his calm and gentle expression suddenly changed. Then he took a big step forward and vomited violently. Even when there was nothing left in his stomach, it was still acidic water. In the end, he even vomited blood, and tears flowed down his face. Chu Yang and Emo Tianji instructed everyone to wait in place. Then, the two of them quickly walked over. "How is it?" Chu Yang first gave Xie Danqiong a pill. Then, he helped him circulate his energy to catalyze it before asking. Xie Danqiong looked exhausted. His face was somewhat pale as he said in a low voice, "I've asked clearly." Chu Yang and Emo Tianji felt their spirits shake. Then, Xie Danqiong spoke tirelessly. The more Chu Yang and Emo Tianji listened, the uglier their faces became. They thought that they could catch a small fish here. But they never thought that they would catch a huge whale. On the other side, 2 of the 4 white-robed men chased after the black shadow. After 50 miles, they felt that the person in front of them slowed down. The 2 of them were about to go forward and fight. Suddenly, there was a tremor behind them. A long cry came from afar. Then there was a rumbling sound. "There are enemies over there." The leader of the black-robed masked men immediately knew that things were not good. He immediately stopped. Another person said, "Why?" With the cultivation of 3rd and 4th brother, no matter what enemies they encounter, they should be fine. Even if they can't beat them, they should be able to escape. The leader of the white-robed men said with a heavy face, "Not necessarily. What I'm worried about now is whether we have fallen into a trap, whether the enemies are attacking us one by one." The other person's face also changed. The rumbling sound behind them became louder and louder. It was as if a whole mountain had collapsed. But now, they were more than 100 miles away from the mountain pass. Not to mention such heavy snow, even if the sky was clear, they probably wouldn't be able to see it. "Let's go back and take a look." The leader of the black-robed masked men only felt upset. But brothers were connected by heart. The second person naturally felt uneasy. A strong sense of foreboding shrouded his heart. "Let's go." The 2 of them jumped up at the same time and were about to rush back. The 2 of them gave up on the black-robed man that they had been chasing for so long. But even if they gave up, the other party would not necessarily give up. At this moment, a voice full of vicissitudes of life said lightly, "Go? You want to chase and leave as you wish? How can there be such an easy thing in this world?" As the voice spoke, a sharp pressure, as if it had been hundreds of thousands of years of vicissitudes of life, pressed down on them. Under this pressure, the 2 8th-grade supreme martial artists felt an extreme sense of danger at the same time. It was as if they were being targeted by a poisonous snake. Goosebumps were about to rise all over their bodies. Under such pressure, if the 2 of them walked according to their original plan, then the gap behind them would be completely under the enemy's control. Facing such an expert, exposing such a gap was almost equivalent to being at the mercy of the enemy. The 2 of them felt a wave of regret and fear. After chasing the other party for so long, they actually didn't know that the other party was such a super expert. The 2 of them slowly turned around. Looking at the black shadow in front of them, they said in a low voice, "Who exactly are you?" The black shadow stood there now, but it still gave the 2 of them a feeling. It was a cloud of fog. It didn't have a physical body at all. The 2 of them never dreamed that there was such a person in the world. The black shadow sneered. "Who am I? You have chased me for so long. Don't you know?" The black shadow was, of course, the sword spirit that came out of the tribulation space. Only he had the ability to completely entangle these 2 people. This was the first time that the sword spirit's body had materialized. The two men in white took a few steps back at the same time. In a low voice, they said, "Since you have such cultivation, you must have a name. We are all people of the martial world. There is no point in hiding. Please be more straightforward." The sword spirit sneered. "Since there is no point in hiding, then who are the two of you? What are your names?" The two of them were speechless at the same time. If they could register, why would they cover their faces? The sword spirit's body fluttered. The two of them were shocked at the same time, thinking that he was going to attack. They pressed their hands on the hilts of their swords at the same time. With a clang, their swords were unsheathed at the same time. Under the guidance of the aura, the two 8th-grade supreme martial artists drew their swords together. The momentum was amazing. Even the surrounding snowflakes were cut into pieces by the sudden sword aura. The swords were like spiritual snakes, piercing toward the sword spirit. The sword spirit didn't dodge. He just looked at the two of them bleakly. His gaze was indifferent. Swoosh. The two swords pierced into the sword spirit's body at the same time. Although the two men in white didn't know why the other party didn't dodge, they couldn't help but feel ecstatic when the swords pierced into the other party's body. They hurriedly activated their internal energy, and the sword aura exploded at the same time. But then, something that shocked the two of them happened. Their sword aura rampaged in the other party's body, but it was as if they were stirring up a thick fog. There was no sense of substance at all. The two of them were almost scared to death. Had the enemy left? Only an illusion was left? Looking up, they saw the other party's shining eyes looking at them bleakly. There was actually a sense of scrutiny. The two of them shuddered and almost froze there. What kind of martial arts was this? He allowed the swords to enter his body and allowed the sword aura to stir his internal organs, but he was indifferent, as if he wasn't hurt at all. Even though the two of them were 8th-grade supreme martial artists, they were really dizzy at this moment. No matter what kind of martial arts this was, but what kind of cultivation could be so arrogant? Could be so unscrupulous? Thinking of this, the two of them even felt their legs go soft. The sword spirit looked at the two of them holding the sword hilts. Looking at the swords that were completely inserted into his body, he frowned and asked curiously, "Is this okay?" The two of them were almost crying. "Is that okay? What do you think?" "Damn it." The sword spirit stretched out a hand. The two of them could clearly see that this hand was a little thin and pale. One look and they could tell that it was the hand of an old man. They saw this injured hand pinching the blade of the sword with two pale fingers. He murmured, "This is the heart, right? This sword of yours is also quite interesting." This sword belonged to the leader in white. This sword was also directly inserted into his heart. By right, it was a fatal injury, but the other party actually didn't seem to notice it at all. He allowed the sword to be inserted into his heart and even said, "This sword of yours is also quite interesting." How interesting it was, the man in white didn't feel it at all. But how terrifying it was, he deeply experienced it. Was he still human? Let go. How can such a piece of scrap metal hurt me? The sword spirit seemed to be a little regretful as he said. The two of them let go of their hands in a daze and looked at him in horror. The sword spirit sighed and used his hand to grab the sword hilt. Little by little, he pulled it out of his stomach. The blade of the sword was clear and there was no blood at all. With a bang, the sword fell on the snowy ground. With another bang, the sword fell on the snowy ground again. The blade of the sword was clean. The two men in white saw at the same time that the small hole in the body of this mysterious and unfathomable expert in front of them was actually slowly healing. The two of them groaned. What kind of monster did we meet? The body under the clothes couldn't be seen. But even the clothes could automatically heal, what more the body? Take the sword away. The sword spirit sighed regretfully. It seemed that he was very regretful that the others didn't kill him. The two of them bent down like wooden puppets and picked up the sword. They didn't know what to say. Even if the sky fell down at this moment, the two supreme martial artists would still feel that it wasn't as shocking as what was happening in front of them at this moment. Chapter 1438. This situation was a little comical. Smart kids remember Network's super fast Hanson the top of the mountain, There was a huge rock. Two people were under the huge rock, craning their necks and looking up carefully. On the top of the huge rock, one person was looking down carefully with his head lowered. Their eyes met at once. The three of them looked at each other at the same time, then opened their mouths and screamed at the same time. Never in their wildest dreams would the two men in white have imagined that they had rushed here at full speed with great difficulty. Just as they were about to cross the mountain, a person would suddenly appear from above. Rui Badong also didn't expect the two of them to be so fast. He had flown here directly from a high altitude in a straight line. He wanted to stretch his head out to see where the two of them were, but when he stretched his head out, he almost bumped into their foreheads. He couldn't help but scream as well. The three of them screamed at the same time, and Rui Badong was the first to attack. "You scared me. Go down." Two palms and snow danced in the air. The two of them were hanging from the cliff. Faced with Rui Badong's attack, they had no choice but to use one hand to receive it. With a boom, Rui Badong was sent flying high into the air like a spinning ball. Rui Badong had used 120% of his strength in this attack, but especially so, all the recoil was also unprecedentedly huge. The two of them were genuine 8th grade supreme martial artists. He flew up, spitting out blood. He only felt that his internal organs were completely shattered at this moment, and he was actually sent flying all the way to the clouds. He almost lost all consciousness. "I didn't even think of fighting head-on." In a daze, Rui Badong thought very wrongly. "But it's too much of a coincidence." Below, the two men in white screamed. Under the strong impact, and with the other party's huge force from above, they couldn't hold on to the mountain wall at all. With a crack, the stone wall that they were holding on to with their other hand turned into powder, and then they tumbled down headfirst. This was a cliff at the top of the mountain, thousands of feet high. This tumble wasn't a big deal, but they immediately rolled down from the top of the mountain. Rui Badong's attack power hadn't disappeared, and together with the recoil, the two of them couldn't control their bodies at all and couldn't stop at all. They rolled down vigorously all the way. Immediately, the big rock that Rui Badong was on shook, and with a loud bang, it rolled down from the top of the mountain like a meteor. Boom, 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 boom. This burst of momentum was truly earth-shaking. Chu Yang and the others hurried over. They had just arrived at the foot of the mountain when they saw that the top of the mountain suddenly trembled as if there was an earthquake. Then, the trembling became more and more intense, and slowly, the mountains began to echo. Rumble. Then, everyone was shocked to find that the snow on top of the mountain suddenly started an avalanche. As large chunks of snow fell, the mountain also began to collapse. And at the forefront, two huge snowballs rolled down from the top of the mountain. Wherever they rolled, the snowflakes would fall on them. Very quickly, they formed two gigantic snowballs. He rolled down from the top of the mountain like a thunderbolt. His aura was truly terrifying to the extreme. Behind these two huge snowballs, there was an even bigger snowball. It was that huge rock, and the sound was even more deafening. The avalanche was caused by this thing, and it smashed down with a rumble. It was rolling down one somersault at a slower speed. However, as the accumulated snow slowly stuck to the boulder slowly became round. In the end, it even formed an extra-large snowball. It carried with it a momentum that could topple mountains and overturn seas as it madly rolled down in a heroic manner. "Oh my God!" GMO bit his little finger, his face full of shock. "Today, I finally understand what it means to roll down the mountain like a drum. This is too fucking spectacular." In the blink of an eye, the two snowballs had already rolled to the front. Behind them, there was a magnificent scene as if 10,000 horses were galloping. Countless snowballs rolled down after being formed, and then the snowy waves on the sea were like monstrous waves. Some stones shot out from the layer of snow, flying into the sky, and then rolled down. Just as the two hill-sized gimmicks were about to crush the crowd, Zhang Xian's eyes lit up. The Dong Wushang roared. "Don't dodge!" Chu Yang and Imo Tianji roared. "Attack these three snowballs. There must be enemies inside." The two of them thought very quickly. Why was there an avalanche? Rui Badong had attacked. and Rui Badong must have reached the top of the mountain first to be able to create such a result. If the other party had gone up first, Rui Badong would have been chopped into minced meat long ago. Since Rui Badong attacked from above, then the enemy must have fallen. After falling, of course, they would roll into the snow, and it was a cliff, so they must have rolled all the way down. And for other avalanches and so on, they had to first create a certain amount of vibration. Therefore, when these two people rolled down, they would definitely be in front of the avalanche. Now, there were only 3 huge snowballs in front of the avalanche. Since that was the case, then among these 3, 2 of them must be those 2 supreme martial artists. At the command, the brothers immediately attacked. Chu Yang roared. He pushed against the ground with one hand, and with a boom, the ground in front of him, which was hundreds of feet thick, was lifted up to meet the snowballs. Then he became one with his sword and rushed over. This time, he used the sword technique of the second fragment of the Calamity Sword. A sword blade that has been famous since ancient times, sweeping the wind and clouds from the west to the east. The sun and the moon are his thunder generals, splitting mountains and breaking peaks, and the sky is blood red. The long sword emitted a green-blue electric glow, drawing a beautiful color in the vast expanse of snow. Then, it gathered fiercely, and a rainbow appeared in the vast sky and snow. It was like the fury of the thunder god. Gu Duxing became one with his sword and pierced straight through the air. Dong Wuxiang raised his saber high above his head and slashed down with all his strength. The others, Ao Xian, Xie Danqiong, GMO, Luo Kadi, Mo Lei, Mo Qingwu, and so on, all attacked at the same time. Everyone attacked with a killer move. Mo Tianji was so anxious that he jumped and shouted, "I want them alive! I want them alive!" In the blink of an eye, the 2 white-robed people inside the 2 snowballs sensed a huge danger. Ignoring the fact that they were still rolling, they exerted their strength fiercely. With 2 loud booms, countless snowballs suddenly shot out in all directions like exploding flowers. They were as fast as lightning with a strong impact force. But Gu Duxing and the others didn't retreat. They allowed the snowballs to hit their faces and bodies. Their hands attacked as usual. The 2 8th-grade supreme martial artists had just opened their eyes when they saw a mountain of sabers and a forest of swords coming towards them. At this moment, the 2 of them really had the urge to pee in their pants. Where did so many experts suddenly appear from? There was clearly no one for thousands of miles just now. This was too unreal, but the 2 of them didn't have time to think. They couldn't even stand up and were still rolling. So they drew their swords. They first used sword light to protect their vital parts. Both of them revealed a vicious look in their eyes. Not only was it vicious to the enemy, but it was also vicious to themselves. At this point, they could only fight with their lives. Anyone in this situation would have the same choice as these 2. They had reached the top of the mountain with great difficulty, but they were caught off guard and attacked. They were forced down in one move and turned into snowballs, but they couldn't stop their momentum. It wasn't easy to shake off the snowballs with all their might. What came towards them was a sea of saber light and sword light, and all of them were supreme martial artist experts who had surpassed the boundary between immortal and mortal. Not to mention the 2 of them, even with the cultivation of the Moon Breeze couple, under such circumstances. Their minds were also blank. This was something beyond the scope of human thinking. Green light flashed, sword energy rose, and saber light was shrill. Boom! Everyone was in a state of desperation. They collided together crazily. Ah! A scream shook the sky. 17 to 18 sword marks appeared on one of the supreme martial artist's body. One of his arms was chopped off. Blood spurted out like a fountain from all over his body. He finally stood still. A transparent hole appeared at the base of his thigh. The right side of his chest was even more bloody. His pale ribs were broken and hanging outside. But Gu Duxing, GMO, and Luo Kadi who attacked him staggered backward at the same time. Luo Kadi only retreated 5 steps before he fell to the ground. He spat out 2 mouthfuls of blood. A thin wound on his shoulder spread on his white robe, all the way to his chest. Then, blood broke through the blockade and spurted out in a line. In this confrontation, the enemy had almost separated his entire body. Jianghu rolled out. His body was also covered with sword marks. He spat out blood as he rolled. Gu Duxing was not in a good state either. The sword wound on his left arm was almost bone deep. His face was flushed, but he was the one who was in the best situation. He did not have time to look at the situation of the enemy. He pulled Luo Kadi over and threw an incomplete version of the heavy pill into Luo Kadi's mouth. Then he caught up with GMO and did the same. Then he turned into a long rainbow and came back. At this time, the 8th grade supreme martial artist's eyes widened. He could not support his body and fell backward. Gu Duxing flew up and knocked him out with a slap. Then he grabbed him by the neck and retreated quickly. GMO and Luo Kadi had already taken the incomplete version of the heavy pill. The two of them could be said to be fine. But this person's body could no longer withstand the subsequent snow waves. It was enough to crush him to death. And Mo Tianji said that he wanted him alive. So, Gu Duxing made a prompt decision to knock this person out and take him away. The battle circle on his side had already ended. Chu Yang led a group of female soldiers and Xie Danqiong to attack the other person. This battle was really too rushed. To these two supreme martial artists, it was rushed. But to Chu Yang and the others, how was it not? They were also rushing into battle. Chu Yang was duty-bound. He could only charge at the front. Mo Qingwu could not be hurt. If she was hurt, he would be heartbroken. Mo Lei was his sister-in-law. She could not be hurt either. But the two female soldiers were still charging very quickly. Chu Yang swung his sword. Together with his sword, he turned into a round light pillar. His whole body was covered with bright and cold sword aura. He took the lead. But he was still not the fastest. Because at the same time that he rushed up, there was already an extremely bright flower blooming above the head of the white-robed supreme martial artist. Xie Danqiong's jasper flower. Chapter 1439. At this moment, a dreamlike color was added to this mountain-collapsing, tsunami-like scene. Smart kids remember Network's super fast hands. This white-robed man was the third of the 4 experts. Suddenly encountering such a desperate attack, he was instantly thrown into disarray. Instinctively, before he could stop his body's momentum, he used all the methods that he could think of, all the methods that he thought were powerful, without any purpose in mind. For a moment, at the front of this avalanche, a huge tornado appeared with a whoosh. Xie Danqiong's viburnum flowers were scattered in the blink of an eye. Xie Danqiong snorted and somersaulted into the air, clearing a path for Chu Yang to attack. He also dodged the powerful attack himself. Although the viburnum flowers only flashed for a moment, this person's head and shoulders were already splattered with blood. The viburnum flowers, after all, the blood flowers that exclusively belonged to the viburnum flowers had begun to bloom. Then, Chu Yang's powerful calamity sword technique came from the air with a majestic aura. The viburnum flowers were already dazzling in his eyes. He had not adjusted his center of gravity after rolling down from the mountain peak. His panic and fury from the sudden attack had not disappeared yet. Right now, this white-robed supreme martial artist was at the saddest moment of his life. Seeing the long sword light, he roared and stabbed his sword with all his might. With 2 clangs, the long sword in the supreme martial artist's hand shattered under the calamity sword technique. Chu Yang's long sword remained motionless and resolute as it stabbed towards his chest. The white-robed man put his hands together. The wind from his palms suddenly sounded. But then, his skin and flesh were torn apart. Chu Yang let out a blood-curdling scream, and his legs flew up like a whirlwind. Chu Yang's sword light scattered, and he spouted a mouthful of blood. The sword light flashed, and Chu Yang's legs flew up while spinning. 2 fountains of blood spurted out from the wounds. This supreme martial artist's scream was no longer a human's voice. His right hand, which was already bony and without any flesh, slammed desperately on Chu Yang's chest. But Chu Yang's long sword had already broken in the end. The sky was blood red. With a swoosh, his left and right arms were severed at the shoulder at the same time, one to the left and one to the right. They flew far away into the raging snowstorm and disappeared in a flash. Chu Yang rolled on the ground. 2 of his ribs were broken, but he didn't retreat. Because at this moment, Emo Qingwu and Emo Lei's attacks had already rushed in from the left and right behind him. Keep him alive, Chu Yang shouted in a deep voice. Emo Qingwu's dreaming of a gentle dance saber moved to the side. Emo Lei raised her short sword and dodged the man in white's vital points. However, at the same time, her other hand struck the man in white's chest with the force of 1,000 pounds. Only after attacking did they discover that the man had lost all his limbs. The 2 women were stunned. With a sound, the man's body, which had lost all 4 of his limbs, was heavily injured. He flew up from the ground, heading towards the nearby avalanche storm. Chu Yang's figure flashed, and he grabbed his chest. He shouted, "Retreat!" The 4 of them retreated like a whirlwind. With each flash, they were 300 meters away. The place where the battle took place had already been submerged by the surging snow waves. Mo Tianji did not participate in the battle. The most unlucky ones were probably Dong Wuxiang and Ao Xin. These 2 brothers rushed up like mad tigers. With a saber and a sword, they attacked the biggest snowball at the same time. With a boom, the snowball was split into 2 halves. A huge rock weighing tens of thousands of kilograms was split into 2, smashing towards Dong Wuxiang and Ao Xin's heads. Fuck! At this moment, whether it was the graceful Ao Xin or Dong Wuxiang, who had always been as steady as a mountain, both of them could not help but curse. The 2 of them were so depressed that they almost vomited blood. They attacked with all their might, ready to subdue the enemy. Who would have thought that there was actually a huge rock inside? However, the power of its momentum was not to be underestimated. This rock rolled down from the top of the mountain from 3,000 feet high. The inertia it carried was simply destructive. No matter how unwilling the 2 of them were, they could only use their own sabers and swords to split this abominable rock into 2 halves again. Behind them were their brothers and sisters. How could the 2 of them let such a huge rock pass? However, their wrists were already sore and numb from the previous attack. Now that they had to do it again, their chests immediately felt stuffy and they hurriedly retreated. 1 huge rock turned into 4 pieces, and its momentum didn't stop. Mo Tianji's sleeves fluttered as he rushed forward like lightning. With 2 kicks, he kicked Dong Wuxiang and Ao Xin far away. Then, with a snort, he lifted up a huge piece of land from the ground and threw it fiercely onto it. Then he immediately retreated. With a boom, a wave of snow shot into the sky. It directly shot thousands of feet into the sky. The 10 of them quickly retreated, dodging and dodging. They ran for an unknown distance before they managed to avoid this wave of avalanches. As they retreated, everyone realized that Dong Wuxiang's posture was a little strange. This mighty and domineering second Master Dong was frowning. His back was bent, and his legs were together as he jumped. He jumped again, and actually refused to take large strides to run. This made the brothers, who were familiar with Dong Wuxiang's bold style, feel extremely strange. After finally escaping from danger, Dong Wuxiang immediately sat down on the ground. His 2 hands covered his lower abdomen. His face turned black, and beads of sweat dripped down. What's wrong? Chu Yang carried the white-robed supreme martial artist over and placed him on the ground as he asked Dong Wuxiang. Dong Wuxiang's forehead was full of sweat. He stood at the side, glaring angrily at Mo Tianji. What's wrong? You should ask Mo Tianji. That bastard? Dong Wuxiang's lips were trembling. His boorish face was distorted, and his voice was trembling, as if he was trying his best to suppress his pain. Ask Tianji? GMO scratched his head, confused. Luogdi also scratched his head, and said thoughtfully, looking at 4th brother Dong, it seems like he has hurt his bird. Everyone looked and felt that Luo Kudi's words made sense. Mo Tianji was also confused. He walked forward and asked, Ask me? What's wrong? Dong Wuxiang was in so much pain that his mouth was crooked. Where did you kick? Fuck you, you bastard? Mo complained with a black face. Second brother Mo, did you do it on purpose? Mo Tianji was speechless, and he was a little embarrassed. Mo Lei-er's words especially made Mo Tianji even more embarrassed. It turned out that one of the two kicks that Mo Tianji used to show off his power had landed on Dong Wuxiang's crotch, and it was purely an accident. At that time, Mo Tianji was only in a hurry to kick the two of them away, but who knew that he would kick there? Second Master Dong was almost tortured to death along the way. This place was not like other places. No matter how mighty Dong Wuxiang was, no matter how strong he was, he would definitely not be able to endure being kicked like this. Hurry up and take a look. Mo Tianji was a little regretful. See if it can still be used. Mo Lei-er's face instantly turned red. She glared fiercely at Mo Tianji and stepped to one side with a red face. Haha. GMO, Luokadi, Ao Xie Yun and the rest laughed, holding their stomachs. No one had seen Mo Tianji's embarrassed look before, and they really enjoyed it today. Xie Danqiong was the fastest. He directly used the snow to create a wall, isolating Mo Qingwu and Mo Lei-er outside. Then Chu Yang and Mo Tianji carried Dong Wuxiang in to take a look. GMO also shamelessly followed in. After a long time, sounds of relief could be heard from inside. Second Master Ji chuckled as he came out. Everyone asked, "How is it?" Mo Lei-er's face was red, but her ears perked up, and her eyes secretly glanced at GMO. GMO happily walked over and said in a loud voice, "Sister-in-law, don't worry. It can still be used. Can still be used." Before he finished speaking, poof, kicked GMO in the stomach, and then moved forward, punching and kicking him. In the blink of an eye, GMO was hit by more than 10 punches, 30 to 40 kicks, and like a shooting star, his butt flew backward like an arrow, and with a whoosh, he flew out. Mo Lei-er stomped her feet and hid behind Mo Qingwu, not coming out again. Only the laughter of a bunch of idiots could be heard. After a long time, Chu Yang and Mo Tianji also came out with strange expressions. They seemed to be smiling, obviously trying to hold it in. Then, Second Master Dong came out. He strode out with a majestic gait. But the laughter also turned into a frenzy at this moment. Second Master Dong scratched his head and glared fiercely at Mo Tianji. His black face actually turned red. In the distance, GMO limped back, out of breath. "I really have to take my hat off. I actually got beaten up while reporting the good news." A shout came from afar. "Come and get me quickly." It was Rui Butong. Lord Phoenix was seriously injured by this attack. When he landed, the avalanche hadn't passed yet, so he couldn't move. His body was bruised all over. When he saw that the avalanche had passed, he carefully went down the mountain. But he was extremely weak, so he could only cry for help. "I'll go." Luo Kadi volunteered and left in a flash. "Both of them are still alive, right?" Mo Tianji asked in a low voice. "Both of them are alive." Gu Duxing said, "How do we start?" Mo Tianji looked at Chu Yang. Chu Yang frowned and said, "When dealing with high-level supreme martial artists whose spirits are basically fixed, physical torture is useless. We can only use real torture methods." Mo Tianji was a little worried. Among these people, there really wasn't anyone famous for torture. There were quite a lot of heroes. Gu Duxing and Dong Wuxiang won't do. Chu Yang directly rejected two of them. Mo Tianji agreed. If Gu Duxing and Dong Wuxiang were to be interrogated, if the two of them had the temperament of valuing heroes, and saw that the other party was really tough, they would definitely give them a quick death in the name of respect. But then, everything that Mo Tianji had painstakingly planned would be destroyed by the two of them. Chu Yang rubbed his temples and said, "Ao Xiun and Xie Danqiong will do. Xie Danqiong will be the leader, and Ao Xiun will assist." Mo Tianji frowned. "Will it work?" Chu Yang gave him a reassuring look. "Trust me." Mo Tianji didn't say anything. What they didn't know was that in the previous life, Ao Xiun and Xie Danqiong were known as Xie Gong and Qiong respectively. Both of them were overlords of their own areas. However, the two of them were also cold-hearted people. They were much more proficient than Mo Tianji and Gu Duxing when it came to extorting a confession by torture. Chapter 1440. The two supreme martial artists were extremely miserable at this moment. They couldn't advance, retreat, talk or scold. They looked at the sword spirit in disbelief, as if they had seen a ghost. Smart kids remember Network's super fast hands as for fighting. Cough, where would they find the courage to fight now? What a joke! What was there to fight when encountering such a monster? The sword energy of an 8th grade supreme martial artist's lifetime of cultivation had swirled around the opponent's internal organs, yet there wasn't a single drop of blood. What was there to fight? The opponent didn't resist at all, even letting you chop him to death. Who would have the courage to fight when facing such an opponent? That was a joke. The sword spirit was helpless too. He was a soul to begin with. Although he had condensed into a physical form and looked like a physical form, in fact, he was still a soul. Some souls might be afraid of fire, some might be afraid of, but he definitely wasn't afraid of weapons like sabers, spears, swords and halberds. They couldn't cause any harm at all. As long as the opponent didn't use soul attacks or mental attacks, the sword spirit would never suffer any harm. But who would dare to use mental attacks against such a monster? Wouldn't that be sending himself to his death? Although the sword spirit couldn't be hurt, he couldn't hurt others either. After all, he was still a spirit body. When he killed Shichishu earlier, he was close to the sword master and could use the sword master's power for his own use, killing him unexpectedly. But now, in the face of these two genuine 8th grade supreme martial artists, the sword spirit was completely powerless. But his task was to delay them and not let them come back to help. The sword spirit was full of confidence in this. He didn't need to deliberately pretend to be anything, and he could create the aura of a peerless expert. He didn't need to deliberately pretend to be something, and there was already no limit to it. He shifted his position and stood with his hands behind his back. Looking at the two of them. He just stood on the ground and looked at them, but the two of them had an inexplicable feeling of being looked down on, as if he was standing high above them. Like a sovereign descending to the world. The two of them had only felt this feeling in front of the Dharma Supreme. But at this moment, not knowing if it was a psychological effect or something else, the two of them felt the aura of this person in front of them at the same time. More than the Dharma Supreme. More powerful. And much more powerful. Both of them had the same feeling at the same time. Could it be that this person was actually a legendary character from ancient times? Thinking of this, the two of them immediately regretted it so much that their intestines turned green. How could they deal with such a powerful figure? Although there was only a difference of 1 grade between an 8th grade supreme martial artist and a middle grade supreme martial artist, the difference was like heaven and earth. Even if the two of them had guts as big as the sky, no matter how confident they were. Nor did they dare to be confident that the two of them could defeat the Dharma Supreme. Moreover, this person was obviously stronger than the Dharma Supreme. Although the Dharma Supreme was powerful, he would still die if the sword went into his stomach and the sword aura exploded. However, the person in front of him did not even shed a single drop of blood. Who was strong and who was weak? Was there even a need to ask? Senior, may I ask who it is? The leader of the masked men in white asked nervously. The way she addressed him as senior was very particular. His voice was filled with vicissitudes of life. Even his aura carried a sense of desolation. His gaze was even more like it was from the ancient times. He also had such a shocking martial arts that could make ghosts and gods weep. If such a person wasn't a senior, then who was? The sword spirit sighed and said, "Who am I?" He said in disappointment, "Who am I?" He actually fell silent. He looked up at the sky as if deep in thought. After a long while, he said in a somewhat desolate manner, "It's been too long, and I've already forgotten who I am. I only remember that the winds and clouds of the world have changed, and the world has changed. Everything is like that. You're all young, and you still don't understand how this old man feels. You are young, you still don't understand." The two 8th grade supreme martial artists were a little dizzy. Suddenly, a light flashed in their minds and they asked carefully, "Senior, could you be Supreme Martial Artist Senior Chinfeng?" The sword spirit frowned at once. "Chinfeng? You mean that Shaoqin from tens of thousands of years ago? Shaoqin? The two masked men in white were on the verge of collapsing. Heavens! Supreme martial artist Qin Feng in front of this person was actually Shaoqin. The sword spirit said very bleakly, I am older than him by so many years. The two men in white were completely stunned. So many years older than supreme martial artist Qin Feng. For a long time, the three of them did not speak. The man in white finally mustered up his courage and said, Senior, we still have two brothers. Now we might. The sword spirit rolled his eyes slightly. The man in white said, Is it possible for the two of us to take our leave first? After we meet up with our two brothers, we will listen to Senior's teachings together. The sword spirit laughed coldly. Before this old man finishes asking, If you dare to take a step, you can try it. The two of them instantly froze on the spot like statues. This sentence was said with a murderous aura. It was very clear. If you dare to move, I will kill you. And without a doubt, the other party had such strength. The rumbling sound in the distance had already gradually disappeared. The two of them were burning with anxiety, but if this mysterious and unfathomable old senior in front of them didn't ask them to leave, the two of them really didn't dare to move at all. The two masked men in white respectfully apologized and said, Today's matter, we have offended Senior. You have indeed offended me. The sword spirit said faintly, But this old man has already killed one person today. That's enough, I can't kill anymore. He paused and said, This old man has a habit in his life, and that is to be benevolent. The heavens have the virtue of cherishing life. How can we casually kill people just because we have martial strength? Isn't that going against the principles of yin and yang? The two of them felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off their shoulders. They hurriedly said, Senior is magnanimous and benevolent. This junior will forever be grateful and engraved in his heart. However, they heard the sword spirit continue his unfinished sentence. Therefore, this old man has always been compassionate towards the state of the universe and the fate of mankind. I have never casually killed anyone. However, there are too many people in this world who deserve to be killed. I have to kill them. Therefore, this old man has made a solemn vow to the heavens and earth. I will only kill one person a day. I will not kill more. The words of the two men in white were instantly stuck in their throats. For a moment, a feeling of extreme speechlessness surged up from the bottom of their hearts. If you kill one person a day, then wouldn't you have killed 315 people a year? You are fucking older than Qin Feng by so many years. Then you must have lived for at least 70 to 80,000 years. Doesn't that mean you have killed at least 20 million people? Damn it, you are actually being benevolent and compassionate towards the fate of mankind. This is really... Human lives are at stake. You can't kill recklessly. The sword spirit sighed deeply. The two men in white were speechless. They didn't know what to say anymore. Even if there are people who offend me, I will only kill one. At most, I will make up for it tomorrow or the day after. The sword spirit smiled desolately. How can human lives be treated lightly? The two supreme martial artists only felt that their heads were buzzing. They couldn't stand this old fellow's pretentiousness anymore. Let me ask you. The sword spirit narrowed his eyes. Senior, please speak. The two of them bowed together. What are you doing here? The sword spirit asked indifferently. You are actually putting on an act with the young man from the Shi clan? Huh. The two of them were instantly shocked. That fellow offended me before. The sword spirit said indifferently, 3 months ago, many people offended me. He was one of them. However, I only kill one person a day. Today, it is his turn. He is the last one. The two of them were instantly enlightened. I see. No wonder this mysterious and powerful senior would suddenly kill Shi Qishu. It turns out that Shi Qishu had offended him in the past. The two of them heaved a sigh of relief at the same time. They both felt alive in their hearts. So, this has nothing to do with us, the sword spirit said indifferently. Originally, I wanted to leave after killing someone. I only have 1 quota per day and I have already used it. However, there are 4 of you. How can I have so many quotas for you? The two of them were dumbfounded. Quota for killing people? This old fellow actually acted as if he was giving them face when he killed people? If I didn't leave and the four of you offended me, wouldn't I be staying here for 4 days? Wouldn't I have to stay in this world of ice and snow for 4 more days? The sword spirit said indifferently, so, I left. Hee, I didn't expect you to chase after me. This makes me a little curious. Hearing this, the two of them couldn't help but regret their decision. They couldn't help but raise their hands and give themselves a tight slap on the face. Damn it, how good would it be to let him go? Why did he have to be so meddlesome? Now, I don't even have a say in whether I live or die. Since you're chasing me, I naturally want to play with you. The sword spirit snorted and glanced at the two of them. The two of them were ashen-faced. The remorse in their hearts was indescribable. For you, the sword spirit said in an old-fashioned manner, tell me the truth and I will spare your lives. The two of them hesitated for a while. Then, they shook their heads resolutely and said apologetically, Senior, please forgive us. We have a great responsibility. We can't tell you. The sword spirit frowned. His eyes were cold. The two of them were sweating profusely. However, they didn't say anything this time. Forget it. The sword spirit sighed. I won't make things difficult for you. He thought, for hours have passed. Chu Yang should be almost done. Why hasn't he sent a signal yet? Helpless, the sword spirit said with great vicissitudes of life. How about this? You're no match for beans. But, you've offended me today. So, I can't let you go so easily. Where would I put my face? The two of them asked in trepidation, What do you want, Senior? I've been lonely for a long time. The sword spirit said in disappointment, I don't know who are the big clans today. Introduce me to the people of the big clans. Sigh, I remember those years. The two of them were helpless. They had no choice but to introduce the big clans with bitter faces. The sword spirit still wanted to listen to the details. So, the time didn't count. After a long time, Chu Yang finally sent a message. Success. And now, the two of them had only introduced 3 big clans. The sword spirit stood up bleakly. It's not interesting at all? Okay, I see that the two of you are in a hurry. Hurry up and get lost. I'll continue to write 10-30 chapters. But, sigh, this is still my temper. I'll say the ugly words first. If I reach 11:30 before 23 o'clock, I won't be able to write any more chapters. So, if you don't want me to owe you, you can stop voting at 10:30. I'm going to write, and RQ. Chapter 1441. The news from Xie Danqiong's interrogation shocked both Mo Tianji and Chu Yang. These are law enforcement officers. And they are from the Law Enforcement Executive Hall. Smart kids remember that they are under the direct command of the Dharma Supreme. A total of 23 people came to the Northwest this time. 5 second-grade Supreme Martial Artists, 5 7th-grade Supreme Martial Artists and 10 8th-grade Supreme Martial Artists. 3 early-grade Supreme Martial Artists. It is said that the Dharma Supreme has come personally. Just this opening statement was enough to shock Chu Yang and the others. The Dharma Supreme has issued an order for all the clans to send reinforcements. And the Dharma Supreme and the clans have sent people to the upper 3 heavens to check on the news of the tribulation. And they have already confirmed a few people, including Mo Tianji, Gu Duxing, GMO, Luo Kadi and me. Xie Danqiong said, At present, the identities of the 5 of us have already been exposed. Mo Tianji's expression was calm and dark. He asked, What about the others? They are not sure about the others, but they are sure about Li Xiongtu. Xie Danqiong smiled somewhat mockingly. So they have already put in a lot of effort to besiege the Li clan this time. Mo Tianji sneered. Put in a lot of effort, but it is not enough. I want them to put in all their effort. As Dong Wushang and Rui Badong came to the upper 3 heavens early, they escaped this suspicion. But, these people have heard the Dharma Supreme mention Dong Wushang's name before. It looks like Wushang is also being watched. Xie Danqiong said slowly, the situation in the upper 3 heavens is worrying. Oh no. He looked at Mo Tianji with a somewhat worried gaze. Chu Yang frowned and asked, Tianji, have you made arrangements for our relatives and friends in the upper three heavens? Mo Tianji nodded and said, it should be foolproof. Chu Yang asked, oh? Mo Tianji said indifferently, I found a large mountain range and built a manor. Everyone is living there, eating and wearing. It is enough for 100 years. Chu Yang frowned. That is far from enough. Mo Tianji said, the last time, of the millions of purple crystals you left behind, 100,000 of them. I scattered them all over the upper three heavens, using the power of the purple crystals to set up a huge array, covering the entire mountain range. They're all hidden. If one is not proficient in formations. Mo Tianji gritted his teeth and said, even a supreme martial artist at the peak of grade 1 might not be able to break the formation. What about the inside? Chu Yang asked pointedly. If someone from the inside came out and was caught, the formation would collapse. Mo Tianji sneered, how could I not have thought of this? I told everyone that the people inside can come and go as they please. But, in fact, you can neither enter nor leave that great formation. Only after 200 years have passed and the power of the grand formation has weakened will it reveal itself. Otherwise, no one would be able to come out. No one can enter. Mo Tianji faintly smiled. Mo Tianji, have always planned ahead. Since our identities are in danger of being exposed, how can I let myself have any worries? Mo Tianji looked at Gu Duxing, Dong Wushang, and the others with an apologetic look in his eyes. I lied to you. Because, if I didn't lie to you, with the tempers of our family's archdukes, they definitely wouldn't continue to stay in the mountains. Brothers, please understand. He apologized. Mo Tianji actually apologized. This fact made Chu Yang extremely surprised. He knew better than anyone what kind of person Mo Tianji was. Mo Tianji had always been meticulous. This also gave him an almost vicious self-confidence. He wouldn't bow to anyone. Even if he was really wrong, he would still hold on. He could allow himself to make up for his mistakes in secret, but he definitely wouldn't say it in public. Furthermore, he would never apologize to someone in public. This was Mo Tianji's taboo. In his previous life, the master of calculation and manipulation once said, I can be wrong, but I can't bow. I can make up for it, but I definitely won't apologize. I can die, but I definitely won't bow. This was Mo Tianji. But Mo Tianji was actually apologizing to others. Even though he was apologizing to his own brother, Chu Yang still felt a huge surprise. He could feel that the current Mo Tianji was much more mature and powerful than he had been in his previous life. Even if a commander who saw all living things as dirt won every battle, there would still be a day when he would be defeated by himself. But a commander who saw through the world and followed the will of the people would be able to prosper for a long time. Even if there were losses, he would become more and more stable. Gu Duxing and the rest were in a huge surprise. When they heard that the Dharma Supreme had confirmed their identities, they immediately started to worry about their families. They were even more worried that their families would be caught when they went out. Now that they heard Mo Tianji's words, they instantly felt relieved. They couldn't even thank him enough. Why would they care about such a small deception? Besides, this deception was done with good intentions. Everyone expressed that they didn't care. Xie Danqiong wanted to continue reporting, but Mo Tianji stopped him. He said, let me say a few words first. Since the Dharma Supreme and the law enforcement officers have confirmed our identities, it means that the day of a direct battle is not far away. But our current strength isn't enough yet. So, in the future, each of you will have to make plans or preparations. What plans and preparations? GMO asked. For example, how to hide our identities, how not to be suspected, how not to implicate your brothers, how to improve your strength as soon as possible. Mo Tianji said word by word. Everyone fell into deep thought. What else? Chu Yang looked at Xie Danqiong. Mo Tianji, on the other hand, was deep in thought. Using the sheathed sword in his hand, he drew something on the snowy ground. It seemed to be some kind of map. As he drew, he mumbled to himself. However, the drawing was extremely abstract and no one could understand it. Also, the incident in the Medicine Valley was done by the Dharma Supreme with the law enforcement officers. After the massacre in the Medicine Valley, the Dharma Supreme went in to search for something. When he came out, although he didn't say anything, I could feel that he had found what he needed. Chu Yang's whole body shook. His eyes shone brightly as he gritted his teeth. Dharma Supreme, it's really you. Mo Tianji suddenly raised his head. What did the Dharma Supreme find? Chu Yang snorted and said, there's no need to think about this. What he found must be the heaven-nourishing jade. Every time the medicine banquet is held, a portion of the heaven-nourishing jade will be left in the Medicine Valley. The Dharma Supreme must have set his eyes on that. Mo Tianji nodded and made a sound of agreement. He didn't understand the use of the heaven-nourishing jade, but he didn't want to ask Chu Yang about it now. Chu Yang was full of doubts. Although the heaven-nourishing jade was heaven-defying, it could only be used on those who were seriously injured and had their spirit shattered. The Dharma Supreme would rather destroy the entire Medicine Valley to snatch the heaven-nourishing jade. But could it be that the heaven-nourishing jade had other uses? After the incident in the Medicine Valley, he framed the extraterrestrial demons and then slandered you as an extraterrestrial demon. This was also how he came to be. Xie Dan Qiong was somewhat indignant. To think that the most powerful and authoritative Dharma Supreme in the heavens would actually be such a sinister and vicious villain. Gu Duxing said coldly and angrily, how can such a person be worthy of being the Dharma Supreme? Ruling over the heroes of the world? He should be beheaded. Chu Yang had already guessed this and didn't take it to heart. Instead, he laughed at Gu Duxing's words. Beheaded? Huh? Gu Duxing really had a sense of impartiality. However, although they didn't know the use of the mysterious item that the Dharma Supreme snatched, they saw the benefits of that item with their own eyes. It was only now that Xie Dan Qiong's face regained some of its color. It was obvious that the violent vomiting earlier had affected him. He said slowly, back then, the Dharma Supreme was seriously injured. It was all thanks to the internal energy of the people from the law enforcement hall and the continuous slaughter of human lives to maintain his vitality. However, after obtaining that item, the Dharma Supreme's body miraculously recovered. Moreover, his cultivation improved even more. During this period of time, he improved by leaps and bounds. He became more and more unfathomable. When Xie Dan Qiong finished speaking, he saw that Chu Yang's gaze had become deep and profound. He hurriedly stopped talking, afraid that he would disrupt the problem that Chu Yang was currently considering. Chu Yang frowned and thought hard for a while before he asked, what else? There's also the existence of the Doyan Hall. Xie Dan Qiong said, in the land of the law enforcement officers, there's the most mysterious Doyan Hall. It's filled with unparalleled experts. He paused for a moment before he said, the 3 defeats that Gu Yigu mentioned should be the work of the people from the Doyan Hall. Chu Yang nodded slowly. There's also the fact that there seems to be an additional person beside the Dharma Supreme. However, they have never seen him before. It's just a feeling. This is because the Dharma Supreme originally didn't have any abnormalities about him. But now, they sometimes notice very faint black aura rising from him. This kind of black aura makes people very uneasy. When he said this, Chu Yang's and Mo Tianji's expressions changed at the same time. Extraterrestrial demon. Both of them secretly cried out in their hearts. Xie Dan Qiong was startled by the expressions on their faces. Chu Yang took a deep breath. This matter is too important. Be careful not to spread it. Then he said to Xie Dan Qiong, continue. Only then did Xie Dan Qiong continue. What follows is related to the situation in the northwest, including the obstruction of Shao Jingyan and Shi Qishu just now. Even these people don't know what exactly this operation is about. They only know that it's to assist Diwu Qingru in establishing the power of the Diwu clan. In order to achieve this goal, they can pay any price and resort to any means. Chu Yang and Mo Tianji exchanged a look, seeing the complicated look in each other's eyes. Mo Tianji coughed and said softly, we all know that the Dharma Supreme's name is Dongfang Bidao. Later on, Big Brother told me that he was actually one of the tribulations from a very long time ago. His name is Lu Long. After Big Brother investigated the details, he once said, "Is the Dharma Supreme's name called?" He stopped talking and paused for a moment. Then he said word by word, "Diwu Chochang?" Chu Yang's expression was dark and solemn. "That's right." Mo Tianji smiled lightly. A glint flashed across his eyes. He said somewhat elegantly, "Could it be that he wants to rebuild the Diwu clan tens of thousands of years later?" "This isn't impossible." Chu Yang also smiled. Mo Tianji smiled lightly and said, "The melancholy of the past and gentleness of the present. 2 generations of thinkers against the secrets of the heavens." Fifth update. Please vote. To be continued. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.